Hello everyone, let's see, how's it going? Before anyone wonders what I'm eating, my tea's arrived. So, Calvin Gasberg, yes, you were first to the Blackburn, but thank you Osprey28. I'm worried that people are still praising the almighty Blackburn. Hello John Shea, hello Donrick Ironhammer. Hello Rapid Razorback. John Shea, oh no, Blackburn moisture was going to get the grain. Inca, evening all, got here before the Blackburn, I think. Hello Tim Sims. Hello Martin Dock. Hello old Richard. Hello Derp Squad. Hello Daniel Freeman. Oh, hello Stafford Thompson. And hello DGV40. Haven't seen you all. Hope you're okay. And hello Aviator Enterprise. And Albert Zaski. Hello. Well, hello everyone. So, today's topic is, of course, Blackburn Aircraft. I do like it being about Blackburn Aircraft because they're a particular hobby of mine. A particular hobby horse, certainly of mine. And they don't get enough credit because, unfortunately, the aircraft they're developing, it's like the Skewer 2 is what goes into production. But if you'd had peace for about another year or another two, there would probably been the Skewer 3 in production, which would have had a really good engine in it. You'll be talking 1500 horsepower, possibly even 2000 horsepower. And then you could have been dealing with a very, very good dive bomber. There would have been a decent fighter in service as well. And who knows, they might have even managed to make the Albacore work. Please note I said might. But if you're talking about the Fleet Air Arm of 1940, would have had 1940-41, if it had been peace, would have had a Supermarine fighter, Blackburn dive bomber, and a Fairey strike torpedo bomber. I mean, pretty darn cool. Hello Jim Heaton. I'm glad you couldn't miss it. And hello Carl Harmon. Imagine an Albacore with a Merlin. That will be a pretty good sound. I doubt it. I doubt the navalised Westland Whirlwind. That sounds a little bit complicated, but you know. 143 looks interesting. I just hope that landing gear holds. Right. So, let's start off this. Blackburn aircraft of the 1920s and 1930s. They are pretty darn cool. They are pretty darn capable. And whilst I'll be discussing this in sources in a second, there is only really one good book on Blackburn aircraft. And it is A.J. Jackson in the Putnam series. This is just a fantastic book. I have it for Fairey, I have it for Grumman, I have it for a fair number of different makers, and they are all fantastic. And they are worth it. Hello, Jeff Wheeler. Jim Heaton. Blackburn. Yorkshire Engineering. See also Felon and Moore Panther Motorcycle. Yeah. Dave Hrim, to give an example, Ian Carr, your comments got held by YouTube as suspect. There are so many fun things for YouTube at the moment on Blackburn. Rapid Razor, I know you are a PhD in war studies, but it's weird hearing you talk about planes. Possibly, but my PhD thesis is on the development of naval aviation, on how the aircraft and the aircraft carriers were developed in the 1920s and 30s. And you always have to remember, they are developed in synchronization with each other. The reason the Queen Elizabeth carriers, the modern ones, work so well with the F-35B is because they were designed from the ground up to do so, and the F-35B is in many ways designed more for them than it is for the US Navy's LHDs. Because, as far as the US Marine Corps, the LHDs are just a means of getting around. As far as the Royal Navy goes, and the Royal Air Force was concerned as well, the Queen Elizabeth class carriers are going to be their primary strike tool. It's also another reason why it was so expensive to try and convert them from B to C, or any other type of F-35. When did the 20mm cannon go to sea for the UK? Ooh. It would have been one of the sea fires, and I'm trying to remember which mark 8mm cannon. I think it would have been the Seafire Mark III, or Seafire 3, which is it's going to be 1943, I think, they first get it. Up till that point, the 50 cals are the critical ones they have. Yeah, I think it's 43. I wouldn't like to be quoted on it, but I think it's 43 when they finally get the 20mm out to sea on their aircraft. In car. Were plans to develop the Skewer with more power using Bristol Hercules? It was already faster than Skewer. Only 50 mph slower than the later Ferry Barracuda, on about half its power. There were plans to use different engines to improve the Skewer. There were plans to give it more oomph. John Shea, Carl Harmon, but the Abercorn wings would have to strengthen. Would have to strengthen considerably, or the first biplane with sweep wings. There's already one of those featured in here. The Ripon has slightly swept wings. Well, one of the variants of it does. So that's awesome. Dutch Clark, my older brother doesn't want me to talk about ships anymore until I watch Greyhound. Has he lost his marbles, or is it that good? I haven't actually watched it yet, but from people who have watched it, they do say it's very good. It's not 100% there, but no television or movie program ever is. But it is very good. Yeah, Peeler. Carl, sadly, Western was not as good as it looked. Hard to fly and not very manoeuvrable, I think. Most of the early dual engine single-seaters weren't that great. I feel a fun fact today, the CO 617 Squadron, the first operational F-35 UK one, is a naval officer. Yep. They call it the Dam Busters and they put a naval officer in charge. Which is kind of like the Dam Busters again, but we won't get on where they had to go for their navigational training. Now, praise back. I assume Blackburn was swallowed up by BAE. Yes, they all were. So, this is the Blackburn T1 Swift. Power is provided by one 450 horsepower Napier Lion I1B, or IB. Span is 48 feet and 6 inches, which is less than half the span of some of the aircraft we'll be talking about later here. I'm thinking specifically of the Sydney, which has a span of 100 feet. All up weight, 6,300 pounds. That means everything that the aircraft weighs has on it, everything included, is 6,300 pounds. Now let's work that out in kilograms and stone, and the good old thing of now that's roughly 2.8 tons. In fact, it's near enough 2.9 tons. So the aircraft itself, the entire aircraft weighs in at 2.9 tons. Thank you, Dirt Squad. You've got your Iron Brew and snacks. I'm jealous of you now because I had so much Iron Brew getting this right. I'm currently drinking milk. Blackburn Mountain. Oh, good lord! I might be a sock bucket or a channel just created by one of the fans here. Oh, it was gonna happen, wasn't it? It was gonna happen. I don't know. I love that you guys love the Blackburn so much. And there's even some Life of Brian going on here, I think. How big, heavy an area were the aerial torpedoes post-World War until later? Well, that's the interesting thing. The aerial torpedoes don't really grow that much in weight. They start off roughly about 1,600 pounds. And they grow to roughly 1,800, some cases 1,900 pounds. Why? Because actually it's the size of the torpedo which dictates the size of the aircraft. It's not the size of the aircraft which dictates the size of the torpedo. Oh, we've got a new aircraft, we can take a bigger torpedo. No, it's a case of, we found we need a bigger torpedo to actually achieve an impact. You know what that means, everyone? Yep. Bigger aircraft. So, it really is, the weapon system is defining the platform. And if you think it's completely reversed to what we do today almost, in that we talk a lot about the platform and then we start thinking about the weapon systems for it. Well, in this case, and in the 1920s and 30s, it's like this with the cruisers, it's like this with a lot of the ships. The weapon system, am I going to put 16-inch guns on it? Am I going to put 15-inch? Am I going to put in these torpedoes? Am I going to put on these guns? What am I going to do? Defines and designs the weapon system. The platform. Jeff Bieler, did I miss the Blackburn RT1 Kangaroo video? Probably their first naval aircraft. No, you haven't missed it. I just haven't done it yet. It's one of the ones I'm saving for next week. Next week is another research week, so I have got 2 long patrols for you all saved up for it, and I have got a whole load of various 2-minute videos. Because I'm off researching Monday to Friday. Okay. Calm. The in-jokes are real. Yeah. Turning 343. Did I miss the Blackburn already? No. Jeff Healer. Blackburn really did not believe in giving aircraft names in the early days. No. Also, Mike is spiking, to be honest. Let's put it down here, because that's usually slightly better. And I'll turn down the gain a little bit. That should be hopefully okay. Rapidazo, I find it interesting the lack of biplanes, the lack of biplanes in carrier aviation. There are quite a few. I know, it's a joke. Right. Jay Ingolf, Jeff Bealer, the first UK fighter with 20mm cannon was Sea Hurricane 1Cs late in 1941. Oh, cool. I'm not quite sure if they ever got those fitted, but okay. I thought it was one of the Seafires. Oh, must have been reading the wrong thing. Oh well, it happens. Okay. The Blackburn Kangaroo, I think, was designed not for carrier operations, but for basically flight from land. If I remember correctly, it was used by the Royal Air Force and the Peruvian Air Force. And is actually developed from the Blackburn GP seaplane. Which we will, yeah, avoid a bit, because it's a bit weird. There are definitely not enough carrier triplanes. Turning 343. Blackburn, really stupid names. Look at what Sopwith wanted to call the Spitfire. We won't. Hello, King's Rook. Now, while we're on the subject of sources, I mentioned but don't show 2 other books in the live in the recorded video, and they are Ray Sturviant's Squadrons of the Fleet Air Arm and Fleet Air Arm Aircraft, Units and Ships 1920 to 1939. This is particularly cool because this has in it, if any of you are interested in painting aircraft and making sure they look the right colours, you want these. Now, why am I showing you this now? Because this page on the left, well on this side, which is, yeah, it's the left of your screen, it should be, you will find is full of Blackburns. That's what they actually looked like when they were flying around. That's how they were painted. And actually it goes all the way across here and here. Okay? So you have Bison, 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 Blackburn, 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 Dart, 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 Dart. But they are cool, and it's a lovely book. And I will try and photo scan that on my using my phone and post that picture to the community. Can't harm them. Maybe it was a case of fitted for but not with. First example of government's favourite thing. Could be. Or it could be just the squadron I've read about, because the reason I probably didn't think about it was one squadron I was thinking about, which was one of the ones deployed in Mediterranean. Perhaps they didn't get the supplies they needed, so weren't actually operating their cannons, because Hispano cannons were notorious for being tetchy. Jenna, definitely Blackburn. Really stupid names. Okay, Jenna, definitely like the Blackburn Iris and the Cerberus. They are lovely. The Sydney is frankly gorgeous, and I find it really upsetting and sad that they didn't push on that, because if you can imagine a British tri-engined, version of it's a version of the Catalina. It's a lovely aircraft. The Avro Bison is now sending messages. I'm worried about this. We've got the Avro Bison and the Blackburn. Oh. Blackburn is going back to the real username. Okay. So the big innovation with the Blackburn was it was the first Blackburn design with more than one seat, and hence was also the first Blackburn with a tail gunner. Yes. Plus, it was the first Blackburn that, it's going to sound strange, is designed around the military specifications. The Blackburn is an interesting design because it's the first aircraft which we can really show where they put military considerations first and flying capabilities second. And they really did. And Abzaski, why oh why has no one has had an idea for a free-engine Blackburn, triple Blackburn? That'd be scary, but no. Those are fairly good. Those are pretty darn cool books, and I have got. The reason I mentioned British Aerospace is because I've been nicking their pictures wholeheartedly. So that's where most of the pictures have come from. Loving today's t-shirt. Well, I thought it was appropriate for something made in sort of a British inventor. Who's more British inventor than Wallace and Gromit? Or rather, let's be honest, the inventor is Gromit. So, let's talk about engines. Because when we're talking about aircraft design these days, we focus very much on their shaping, on their stealthing, on their aerodynamics. In the 1920s and 30s, honestly, what matters if you want to go fast is having a very big, powerful engine. But the trouble is, your very big, powerful engine weighs a lot. And that's not including the weight of fuel, the weight of radiators, the weight of all the coolant. It is not a fun thing. It is a lot of weight. And the Cub is what leads to this aircraft being produced. Now, I have got to start, I don't know, leaving the pictures stored on my desktop. That would make far easier than me hiding them away in various parts of my computer and then having to hunt them down. Because with the Blackburn, it's big. But it's not this big. This, believe it or not, is a Blackburn Cubbaroo. Now, let me tell you about the Cubbaroo, because she is made entirely to fly using the Cub. So she's supposed to be this sort of single-engined super aircraft in many ways. And if you notice she looks like a Blackburn, there is a reason for that. They're designers dealing with a similar issue. And she does carry torpedoes. She is massive though, and does take up the screen. And it's a... Yes, if any of you are thinking, that looks like she has two aircraft's undercarriages. Yes, they did, because they couldn't find one undercarriage big enough or strong enough to take her, so they used to use two. She comes along after the Blackburn, and is basically designed to use the 10,000-pound Napier Cub engine. And let me give you her data. So, she has an all-up weight of 19,000 pounds. So, any of you who say you feel a few pounds over and you're feeling heavy, well, this thing is 19,000 pounds. You're light. Go have a pizza. Has a span of 88 feet, a length of 54 feet, and a height of 19 foot 4 inches. Her military load was 5,290 pounds. She had a maximum range carrying torpedoes or bombs of 1,800 miles and a top speed of 115 miles per hour. The military load could include up to 3 torpedoes or the equivalent weight in bombs. Crew was undefined, but could be as many as 5. And that was a single-engined attempt at a heavy bomber in my mind. Excuse me a second. Oh, it's just so big. Takes over everything. I'll leave it here for a bit while we got the cow up. So that is the Cubbaroo. It's big. In-car, air engine manufacturing in the UK was shaken up in the mid-1920s by Fairey importing and installing an advanced US engine, the Curtiss D12 engine in their Fairey Fox. That is often overstated for what it is. Fairey do that because they've managed to fall out with Rolls-Royce and Bristol at the same time, because they've been secretly trying to get them to compete against each other. And the engine companies don't mind competing against each other. They don't like it when you keep trying to pass on each other's information to the other. So Fairey got into trouble, and none of the British engine makers would give them their latest engines. So they had to go to an American company. They then changed their designer, who came from another company and who was known to be very honest, and the British company started working with them again. Let's go. The F1 Ferrari idea of design. It doesn't have to be aerodynamic, it just needs a very big engine. It works. And let's be honest, it was also the British car racing strategy at that time, because there is that old joke that, I think it was Porsche made about Bentley, that they were the fastest lorries in the world. Newhouse S. If you could, can you spend some time discussing how Blackburn affected INJNF's naval development in interwar years? Perhaps how the relationship worked? Yes, when we get to Mitsubishi, we'll go through that, because we're going to be looking at the Mitsubishi B2m. I finished all my chicken. Terrible. Turning free for free. Try hard trying to be on Blackburn. Squad. Oh my, I think I might have heard you laugh. Burnmore. We're manufacturing in car. Burnmore were manufacturing engines which were even heavy in the R101 airship. Yep. It looks dependable. Well, what's interesting is that this is what they're building in an experimental one engine, and then you go, right, we need to build a reliable long-range bomb and long-range scout aircraft. Yeah, we're going for 3 engines. Thompson, I believe the Canadians had invented the dually truck by that point. Had someone from Blackburn taken inspiration from that, perhaps? I think so, but basically they were looking for something which could take a lot of weight being put on it, because if you consider again, this aircraft can take about 5,000 pounds of military load, so its normal load is roughly 4,500 pounds. That engine, this thing, is 2,450 pounds. So this engine is 60% of its weight. Yes, it carries double the military load it does engine, but of the unloaded aircraft, this thing, yeah, the one over there, is a huge proportion of the weight. That's what. Yeah, Buckingham, is there another plane hiding inside? No, believe it or not, that's just one aircraft. Buckingham, but in the name Buff was already taken. Carmen, I'm back again until the girlfriend is back. Anxiety is bad today. I'm sorry to hear that. I was sort of laughing you back again, and then you saw you why. Take care of the girlfriend first. Family and the people you love always come first, even before history. Right, those one. It's still the Ferrari ethos. They've been struggling because their current engine is a bit, yeah. Felix B, hope my net is not falling down again. Jeff, Buckingham, not when when that was built, it wasn't. Jeff, was the Kubaru specification the first for the 21-inch torpedo? She was supposed to take 2 very big torpedoes. Andrew Cox, it looks like the HB0400 that got rammed up by a wildebeest. Potentially. Just looked up for scale. The Cooper is roughly the size of a B-25. Yes. Sometimes look like. Yes, that's about the same payload as a 3.5 to 5,000 pound dually pickup. Common in my town. Yep. It's a fun time. So, now, One of the questions I got asked when I started putting out the small videos, was about aircraft propeller design, wooden propeller designs, and so we're going to go into this because I really find this kind of interesting. You have the Weybridge blade, the Heidelin blade, and the Jablot blade are your three main sort of air propeller types of wooden propellers by 1944, and they are developed in large part based off the experience of the interwar years working with them then, and working with the options that wooden propellers gave you. Now, wooden propellers are very strong, very flexible, and very easy to repair in many respects. But they also have some issues. They take a long time to finish, and they are very, very precision craftsmanship to get right. Now, of course, Blackburn started off as propeller manufacturers, so they had this really down pat, and they did really work with mainly the Air Screw Company Ltd. So that's why I've got the Weybridge blade at the top. This blade, which is made by the Air Screw Company Ltd, is carved frail, blank glue, and from the boards of Douglas fir scarf joined at the root end to jickwood, or similar compression, supplied by firms in the United States. Jickwood, supplied by the firm Jickwood Limited, associated with the Air Screw Company, is prepared by coating Canadian birch veneers with about 4% by weight of spirit-soluble mnemonic resin, drying and then consolidating the pack under heat and pressure. The resin content, the conditions of pressuring the supplies jickwood is not stabilized, appreciated either by the resin or by the action of moisture. The blank is rough carved by machine and then finish carved and balanced by hand, due principally to the time required for the conditioning at various stages of the manufacture. The elapsed time for a blade in production is 7 to 12 weeks. Now, in one type of finishing, the blade is covered with a hessian cloth, cemented in place. A brass leading edge strip is plated to brass gauze and hammered, screwed, and riveted in place. A thick sheet of either cellulose nitrate or cellulose accentrate is cemented on, and the whole blade is placed in a rubber bag and then put in an autoclave. In the autoclave, treatment cone is said to penetrate the Douglas fir blade to a depth of about 1/2 inch. In the second type of coating, the second type of finished blade is liberally spread with a thick lacquer, and a sheet of cellulose ester is rolled onto place each face, forming laps at the leading and trailing edges. After coating is shrunk, the laps are carefully sanded. Final blading is done. Biaxial scraping and, if necessary, balancing paint is used locally. These blades are repaired by splicing a new piece to the undamaged portion. Although repair of a damaged root is never attempted, the entire Douglas fir portion of the blade may be replaced, the new scarves nearly coinciding with the old. It is a pretty important thing in spirit, and it's a very critical system. And I apologise again for eating in front of everyone, but we have builders coming tomorrow, so between preparing for them and teaching today, I haven't eaten all day, breakfast or lunch or anything. And so to get this going and make sure I could do this to my normal standards, I had to get some food. And yes, it was stupid of me to forget to eat, but I was busy. And everyone else in the family also forgot to eat, so we're all equally guilty. Carmen, yes, I always got my book happily. She just wants to call me, so I'm there. Take, well, look after her. Sometimes, And depending on brand, they can just lovely looking. Oh. But Osprey 28. Just imagine if you had a time machine and brought them the technical package for the double WASP radial. They'd be in heaven. In car, did the Kubaroo actually fly? Yes, it did fly. It went for several flights. It was tested thoroughly. Now, I think it logged up about 400 to 500 hours in the air. Andrew Cox. A friend has a polished weighbridge blade as an ornament on his living room wall. I'm totally jealous. To be fair, my neighbour across the road does the same. He's ex-RAF and he has this beautiful whole propeller on the wall. And it's just a case of, that looks cool. In car, why are the British still using wooden propellers during World War II? No means to adjust pitch would have adversely affected performance. Yes and no. There are some advantages to using the wooden propellers. Adjusting pitch is a big advantage of a metal propeller, and it is something you can work with. However, the wooden propeller is very light and very, very strong at the time. It's very consistent as well. And this means that it has advantages if you are doing certain types of operations. The pitch works very well if you're needing a very high speed machine. But if you want a very stable machine, a wooden propeller might be worthwhile. And even some Spitfire variants use wooden propellers. Although I can't remember which ones off the top of my head, but I do remember seeing some wooden Spitfire propellers. Daniel Freeman. Wood is basically the best plastic available, and they had a lot of experience with it. Pretty much. Carmen. What she doesn't know, she'll be going to HMS Belfast with me in a few years. It's a good trip. It's a good place to take your girlfriend. It really is. Does a Blackburn survive? I don't think a Blackburn does survive, Carl Harmon. I'm not sure. I can't remember one being in any of the museums I've been into, and when I was looking on the internet I couldn't find one which was an up-to-date picture of it. Mondok, does it just me or does the Kubaroo have similar looks to Beverly? Probably. There are certain, how do I put this politely? Blackburn do develop a certain, how do I put this, style, and they stick with it through all scenarios. Seb Thompson, regarding air screws, at college we went over the basics of making them. As if a bush pilot needed it in a bad landing, we need to know how to make one. It was a pretty cool lesson. Sounds cool to me. In car, looking further, the Kubaroo flew in secrecy. I can see why it was shy. Yeah. You know this. In car, the wood doesn't matter for pitch change. That's controlled by the mechanism at the hub of the propeller. To an extent, but it doesn't. It makes pitch change more difficult. Ian Cox. Given that most naval aircraft with these props were mainly working low level, then a pitch adjustment wouldn't give much advantage. And that was a big factor, especially when you're looking at torpedo bombers and you're looking at other strike aircraft the Navy is using. I was asking, am I seeing correctly that on the Kubaru pilot is again above the engine? Yep. Newhouse S. Early Spitfires had Jablo built blades on rotors Mark 1s to 5. Oh, thank you. Andrew Cox, the oldest British aircraft in existence in Blackburn, the Shuttleworth collection. It's still flyable. Cool. Jay Miller. When did the variable pitch propellers become general issue? They become sort of standard during World War II, about 42, 43, but they are still not necessarily the immediate standard until after World War II. There are still aircraft being designed with wooden propellers. Or air screws, as they're technically called. But if I say that too much, apparently YouTube gets upset with you. Sam Thompson. Yep, helicopter pads out of fresh pine was to be second year. Didn't make it that far though, and I'm on the Rose Cook. Although making a helicopter pad would be quite cool. I'd sort of, if I had the knowledge to build a helicopter pad, and I lived somewhere like the middle of Canada, with all that space around me, and I had a big enough place, I'd probably build the helicopter pad just to see if they come. Literally, build a helicopter pad in the middle of nowhere and see if someone lands their helicopter on it. Or, you know, you'll get one of two scenarios. You'll either get the military show up and go, why have you built a helicopter pad here? Just to see if someone would come visit me. Or you'll get a rich multi-millionaire land going, oh, you must be one of my friends. In which case you can go, no, but landing on my helicopter pad costs £1 million. Andrew Cox, late 30s fighters later for everything else. I think that's about the Hamilton variable pitch propeller. And honestly, it's late 30s for most land-based fighters. For some sea-based fighters, they still haven't got them. Go on. When do you think ships will do a reset? If we see more classes, smaller ships again? When minimally manning becomes viable. Currently, the biggest growth in ship sizes comes from two requirements. One, the need to protect your crew. And two, the size of weapon systems and the amount of power generation needed from them. So, as I don't think weapon systems are going to suddenly magically reduce in size, and I don't think power requirements are going to magically reduce in size, the only options to really start reducing ship size comes when you can reduce your crew dramatically. So that's going to be minimally manning when that's viable. Third option, Daniel Freeman. My friends who do air ambulance helimail work for KSS will drop in and say hello on your helipad. They're more than welcome and will get a barbecue. Same with the military. It's only the rich multi-billionaires who will get charged. King's Rook. Helicopters and bush planes are very much necessary equipment for getting anywhere that isn't 100 kilometers from the lower US border. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Staff Thompson, it's not a brilliant idea. It's just a lazy idea. But I would do it just because it would be the fun thing to do. And, yeah, I've read your writing. You're just a warehouse worker in the same vein that, oh, what was it? You're just a warehouse worker in the same regards as Einstein was a patent office worker. It's where you happen to be making your money at the moment. Okay? Daniel Freeman and me had the same idea at the same time. Just, I had to remember quickly whether it was a Swiss or German patent office he was working in. Dead Squad, talking of dramatic reduction in the crew, do you think drone ships will be a thing as soon like drone aircraft? They're a possibility. They are a definite possibility. But it's going to be, what are you going to want them to do? And also, the thing is, when you're talking about most of those drone aircraft, they are carrying Hellfire missiles, they're carrying this, that. There's a limit to the weapon systems they're carrying. They're nowhere near the sheer firepower that something like a Daring class destroyer has, or something like this. So, I think there will be drone ships. I'm not sure what size they are. And remember, I think I've talked about this on Bilge Pumps. My theory is that they will be landing craft size, large landing craft sized, and take over the role of mostly of what Flower class, etc., corvettes used to do in sort of anti-submarine warfare and extra defence. Carmen, like QE task tech gets smaller, cheaper. Possibly. If more QE enlisters were being built and more people were using that tech, it would make sense. I think I saw a stat that if the US Navy used the same tech that the Queen Elizabeth class were using on their carriers, they could cut their crews down by a third. But the trouble is, quite a lot of their crew are there for the nuclear watch and for the air group. Come on, what crisps you got? I haven't got crisps, I've got a Domino's pizza. Ah, PGC is fun, Daniel. You enjoy it. Postgraduate certificates are cool. Jeff Miller, the Kubaru was strictly land-based, correct? Yes, very much strictly land-based. But it would fly. Just not be based from an aircraft carrier. Well, A, Daniel Freeman, congratulations on the job, and B, enjoy all the perks you can get. Oh. Jefferson, 2 lives back to back? So, evening, Michael Rose. And if you're a recent graduate trying to find a job, that's how at the moment it really is. Anyway, I'm going to expand this picture quickly because I want to talk to you about the Dart. The Dart is a cool aircraft. And mainly it's cool because of specification 320. The Air Ministry is seeking a single-seat torpedo-carrying land plane fully equipped to Admiralty requirements for carrier operations. Later, twin-float seaplane and second cockpit dual-control versions were also added. The Blackburn Dart experimental evolved from the Air Ministry trials on the modified Blackburn T1 Swift prototype M139 and led to the placing of a contract for the Swift with a reduced wingspan. Now, thank you. Kept wanting to play around with the wrong box. Now, the reason I've stopped it here, and I want to look at the Dart, is because I thought I'd talk to you about the road not travelled, because the Blackburn is made, of course, specifically by Blackburn to fit with the same logistics trail as the Dart. So let's consider the other options. The options, of course, are the Blackburn Dart, as we got here. The other option is the Handley Page Handley 1. A free bay, unstaggered biplane of equal span and constant chord, with dihedral on the outer planes. The wooden square-tip main planes were fitted with ailerons and a full-length leading-edge slots on both planes. Handley N143 first flew at Cricklewood on the 3rd of 1st, 1922, followed by N144 and N145 in February and March, effectively. After initial official trials, N143 returned to the firm with some criticism of its performance and handling. Further official trials of N145 confirmed the type's disappointing performance. Meanwhile, a production order for the torpedo carrier was placed for the Blackburn Dart. Improvements were made to the Handley, first with the new wingtips and cavane and modified slots, redesignated Handley 2. By 1923, with additional modifications to slot and slat gear, and again redesignated as the Handley 3, the type took part in a revised torpedo carrier competition to specification 3222. This is why I love this book. So 3222. This dealt with the specification detailed update requirements for the successive productions of batches of the Dart, but also compared it to the Handley Page 2, the Handley Mark III. It was revised, and so the Handley N145 performed well, but in no way was felt out to perform and displace the Blackburn Dart. In fact, broadly speaking, it was disappointing, despite its good performance. So basically, Handley Page keep going, we can do better, we can do better, we can do better, we can do better, we can do better. They win a chance, and they don't get it. And what Handley Page don't realise is that by losing this order, they make the Blackburn come about, because the whole point is the Blackburn will use the same logistics trail, the same support parts, the same spares, the same engineering training as the Dart. Right. Danny Freeman, if there is one thing a career in medicine has taught me, it's that being good at exams does not make you intelligent. Intelligent people find jobs in all sorts of places. That's true. And I was asking, Problem with drone ships is that you need someone to repair hull punctures without crew on board. Airplane pilots just eject when damaged. Ships need the holes plugged. That's the thing. That's going to make that automated is going to be interesting. Let's see. Carmen, read terrible plane names. I don't know why this popped in my mind. Glad never used a fairy lovebird. Oh. Newhouser S, having taught first year university students, that's plainly evident. Sometimes I have to say I love my first years, but I do sometimes. There are two groups I really enjoy teaching, and the group I possibly enjoy the most are the postgraduate students. Because usually when people are doing the masters, A, they really want to be there, and B, they know what they're doing and know what they're about. And the mature foundation year students, the people who are in their 30s and 40s, who haven't got any qualifications, and who are taking a foundation engineering course or a foundation history course, so they can consider going on to doing a degree, because they don't want to go into a college scenario. They don't want to be doing A levels or a sort of a high school diploma. They want to feel that they're on a sort of level appropriate with their maturity, and so they're doing the foundation. And they are usually some of the most fun students to teach, because they're often ones who've had trouble at school for various reasons. Hang on while there. And then in a university scenario, they absolutely blossom, because they can do the time management. They go, yeah, I know I need to do this essay, so they'll get the essay done. They don't wander off and do something else. Carmen, trying to find a job as a museum assistant with 2 years experience is also currently, I can imagine it as well, yeah. That's good. Ian Carr, dropped out of focus me. Sorry for that. That's good. Ian Carr, check the YouTube hasn't decided that you should stream at 144p. Possibly. I find it weird about aircraft flying from Cricklewood, as that is where I am from. Well, they were having a lot of fun flying from there. A Handley Page, don't get me started on Handley Page, just on their aircraft names. Go on. Melanie 16040. How much of the stream have I missed? Not much so far. We're still carrying on. We've just reached the Dart. We haven't reached the Blackburn by a long way. Hello, Juno191. Right then. So, and Melanie 16040. Welcome. I'm not sure if I've seen your handle before, so I'll just say hello. If I have, and I've said welcome then that's good. If I haven't, welcome now. Thank you for joining us. Let's see. Carl Harmon. Didn't know. That's good. The mature students also tend to know their limits, so don't turn up at 1 PM tutorial hungover, at least not too often. I would love to say that, but I taught a master's class, which included at King's. I assisted on one lecture for them, and yeah, it had some US Marine Corps senior officers in it, and some Royal Marine senior officers, and it was part of a course which was being done there somehow, and let's put it this way, they'd had a dinner the night before, and I'm not sure if they'd stopped drinking. In fact, I wasn't really sure if any of them were sober. They were perfectly compos mentis. This is the thing. These were Marines. They were professionals at everything. But yeah, I then got invited out after it was over with them, and they found out I was drinking Iron Brew, which they were quite happy with because there were a couple of Scottish Marines in it, and they immediately understood where I was coming from. I don't drink because of my father, so I drink the soft drink equivalent, and that was fine. But then we had a good, I think it was about 40 minutes of running around London while they tried to find a bar which served Iron Brew. They found one, and I basically spent the next 24 hours drowning in Iron Brew. They were lovely, but and I had a wonderful time, and I was matching them pint for pint. Unfortunately, the bar that served Iron Brew is now closed down. Right. So, this is the Dart 2.0 in a way. This is the Velos. The Velos is cute. The Velos is the Greek one. And what I love this is the Greeks come along and go, we need an aircraft. Yeah. We want it to be reliable. Yes. But it's got to be a seaplane first. And Blackburn turned around to go, well, we have a really reliable aircraft, which is a land plane first and a seaplane second. If we make some changes to that, do you want to try it out? And the Greeks do. And they love it. I mean, there is one of these, I think, at least one, possibly two, still flying when the Italians invade Greece. And they actually score some hits. You know, these aircraft are, by that point, a decade and a half old, if not more. And they're scoring hits. I just find them cute. Mm-hmm. King's Rook. I had to drop out of college second year. 2 years later, I was finally getting my HP hit replaced. Youch. Sometimes, Doctor, the Dart was one of their pretty ones, and many things used to happen where they don't not allowed anymore. Collingwood Shipyard. Ah, yeah, many things. Death Squad. I was going to ask if they just bought their pints of Lexington. No, they were in the lectures. They were drinking really, really strong coffee, which is how I managed to work out quite how much they'd been drinking. There was also the fact that they all look neat and tidy, but they look the neat and tidy, which is when you've shaved in the university toilets. And yeah, they had a lovely time, and I introduced them to the when that bar closed down. We went to Hotel M, I think it was, which is a lovely one, sort of a Hotel M. One of the Hotel M's. It's not the nicest Hotel M. The nicest Hotel M wasn't open at that point. Nicest Hotel M is the one opposite the Tower of London, and that one you can see a beautiful view of HMS Belfast and everything, and it's glorious. But it was one of the other Hotel M's, and that had it was also a nice bar. Sam Thompson, sorry, I'm making frames to make cement blocks as I can't economically get the size I need. I'm listening intensely though. Glad you are, and good luck with the frames. My name was 16. I'm also Schmuckers, who met the damage control man from USS Shangri-La and saw him from the world of Wall Street. Ah, cool. Well, thank you for coming here. And that was a very cool question you asked that in the world of Warship stream. Derp Squad. That's unfortunately true of quite a lot of the fleet era aircraft. Yeah, 30%. Draft Iron Brew. It'll be tired of that. I tell people, hello, drinking with NCOs almost killed my liver, but they made sure I got home. Yes, these were mostly officers and very quite senior officers and very senior NCOs. They don't have livers anymore. They just have a note where it was. Gave up, gone home, keep on drinking. Right, well, now the Velos is a cool aircraft, but the thing I want you to really look at is the armament is one 18-inch torpedo, and there's a reason I listed that. Because the ones built in the Greek aircraft factory, which Blackburn take over as part of this deal. This is the great thing. Blackburn take over the Greek aircraft factory. And they get to take it over for 5 years. In return, they upgrade it to the latest technology and make it all work. And this is why the Greek forces end up with so many Blackburn aircraft, because Blackburn already owned the factory. So you've got the Italians and everyone sending in their aircraft going, yes, see what our beautiful plane is. Yes, buy it. It's gorgeous. On the Germans going, this is a very, very advanced aircraft. Buy it. It's good. And Blackburn going, we own your factory and we build everything for you already. Yes, let's have the Blackburn. Talk about a captive market. It worked though. Good evening, Greg. Do you know one times 18-inch torpedo? Is this predecessor to the Swordfish? This is a predecessor to the Swordfish, but it's the Blackburn stream that feeds into the Swordfish. Because that's the other interesting thing, because the Fairy Swordfish is basically made by taking a load of ideas off Blackburn, mixing them with a load of Fairy ideas, and producing the Swordfish. But the Ripon. Now, this is one of my favourite aircraft of the entire 1920s. And remember, a Dart is the first aircraft to do a night landing on a ship. A Ripon is the first aircraft to do an entire air group landing on a ship at night. They can take off squadrons and all sorts of things at the same time. And also, it's important because it is the formation of squadrons take place while it's in service. It's in service really from 1925 to 1934. And in 1933, under the auspices of a certain Rear Admiral aircraft carriers, the Fleet Air Arm gets converted into squadrons. Now, they wanted an 18-inch torpedo, or 520 pounds, over a relatively short range. One of the interesting things I found is that the range is still something which is up for discussion with this aircraft. And the Ripon 2 is particularly interesting when it comes to that. It worked perfectly that time. That's always good. Ripon 2 is a pretty cool aircraft. Now, let me give you a list of engines tried out in the Ripon during its career as a Fleet Air Arm aircraft. 467 horsepower Napier Lion V, a 570 horsepower Napier Lion XI, or 11, a the Ripon, a 570 horsepower Napier Lion XIA, or a 530 horsepower Bristol Jupiter 8, a 480 horsepower Gnome Rhone Jupiter 6 9AK, a 535 horsepower Armstrong Siddeley Panther 2A, and remember, as I think I've said in at least one of the 2 minutes in the long video, the long patrol, if you hear the words Napier, think liquid cooled, or Rolls-Royce, think liquid cooled. You'll be right most of the time. If you hear the word Bristol or Armstrong Siddeley, think air cooled. Now, someone earlier was suggesting, well, imagine if they got a Wright Cyclone. Well, Ripon did try out with a 524 horsepower Wright Cyclone R1750. The reason being, it was to be bought by the US Navy. And so the Fleet Air Arm got to try it out with a Wright Cyclone in. And a 525 horsepower BMW 132A, courtesy of the Germans, for the Spanish. A 525 horsepower Pratt & Whitney Hornet B, again, courtesy of the Americans. A Hispano Suiza 12 NBR, and an Armstrong Siddeley Tiger 1, and a 570 horsepower Napier Lion XIA, again for the Ripon free. In other words, one type of aircraft is used to test 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 different engine types. It's a very different world than that we live in today. If you consider the F-35 has been developed pretty much with only one engine. The second engine development is mostly there to be able to kick up again, but pretty much only has one engine. We just went through there, and one aircraft type, only one, managed to go through 12 different engines. Does establish a level of competitiveness and a level of incentive amongst engine manufacturers to make sure they're improving their engines and delivering good quality ones. Now, Juno 191, the lower wing has a bit of gull wing shape going on. Correct, it does. It was designed that way to give the wing extra strength and extra space and extra lift, but also, most importantly, to raise up the fuselage of the aircraft to make it easier to load torpedoes. Carl Harmon, Dana Freeman, do people still go for experience? Is 2 years enough to start trying to go somewhere, or should I give it another few years? It depends. It honestly depends on how you sell it. It's 2 years of what experience, what have you done in that time, and what's the experience you had of that time, is my experience when I go for job interviews. Jennifer, I suppose we can forgive Blackburn Aircraft for all the abortive designs, as they did design and produce possibly the best naval strike aircraft of the 20th century. The Buccaneer was gorgeous. Exactly. Looks like guys from Vought spied on the wing shape. A fair number did. Buccaneer, Vought may have faced some of the same design problems with the airscrew. That was certainly a factor, but also Vought were looking at, because of the long engine and the pronounced nose of the Vought Corsair, actually part of the reason they gave them the gull wings was to give you better line of sight out of your cockpit to the deck of the carrier. Nick Waters, that engine mount is like a USB plug. To an extent, yeah. Back here, surely the air screw wasn't big enough to warrant the gun. It wasn't about the size of the air screw in the terms of the Ripon. Although I do have a better photo of a Ripon somewhere, which I'll grab out. Well, another photo of a Ripon for its air screw. Now, I have to warn you, the picture I have got, which I'm going to show you, of the Ripon, bashed up a bit. But it's the only surviving Ripon in the world. So I thought it was worth having a picture of. But you can still quite clearly see the gull wing. You can see that the air screw isn't that massive. The finish didn't use the same the same engine as the Fleet Air Arm did. So that's Armstrong Siddeley, I think, engine in it. Let's see, Armstrong Siddeley Panther 2A, 535 horsepower, because it's a Ripon 2F, so it's for the finish. Come on, Money 1640, was this just using an aircraft to platform test the engine itself, or were they trying to find an appropriate engine for the aircraft? Actually, they were different types of the aircraft being produced for different customers. So, a customer wanted a... right then, so for example, the Finnish one. They said, right, we want this aircraft to operate for us and do this role, but we need to have these characteristics. Okay, what's the right engine to give you those characteristics? So pretty much it's like, the aircraft is your template. Here's your template. What are the characteristics you want? Oh, you want something that can operate with minimal maintenance somewhere really cold. We have just the idea for you. We have an air-cooled Armstrong Siddeley engine, which can really take cold weather very well. Boom, that's in. Oh, no. I want to operate this aircraft in a very hot environment. I want to operate it almost desert-like. Ah, right then. So you'll be wanting the BMW 132A then. And that's what happens. The Royal Navy wants to operate it in salt water around the world. So they need something which they can rely on worldwide. So they go for the Napier Lion XI mainly, and XIA. Why? The Napier Lion at that point is one of the most reliable aircraft engines known to mankind. It's been being used, it's been type tested for thousands of hours, and therefore they can go with it. And it will operate fairly well everywhere in the world. So it doesn't matter if it's cold, it doesn't matter if it's warm. They are putting into this sort of, they can rely on this engine. Juno 191. So I'm going to assume that it's the same problem as the Corsair then with the landing characteristics. Not quite. I'm going to go back to the ribbon because I'm still answering questions on the ribbon. I think it was a bit of a back and forth among a sort of small group of design and engines looking at what could be done in different ways. To an extent, as I said, but as I said, it's also for the different types of who wants to buy what and who's buying what. Melanie 16040, was the size of the air screw a factor with the Corsair? Yes, massively so. But there was a reason it had to be that big to take the power and the torsion of the engine it was hooked up to. So you were hooking up a massive engine, it needed to be a massive air screw to actually be able to effectively use the power it was going to give it. I was asking, is it being rebuilt, or this will be its forever end state? I'm hoping the Finnish are working on rebuilding it. It is part of the Finnish Museum's collection, but they have had a lot of trouble trying to rebuild it because it uses a lot of state-of-the-art materials from the time. If I go back to this one. and I can, to make sure I get the correct materials listed off. Okay, so the lower mainplane was a slightly greater span than the upper, and a new and unusual feature was a lower wing root fairing in the form of 3 ribs rotating through a rear spar and fabric covered to form a filter between the trailing edge and the fuselage. A large 155-gallon fuel tank was fitted to the centre fuselage. Defensive armament consisted of 1 Lewis gun on a rotating mount around the rear cockpit, and alternative offensive loads were 6 230 pounds, 3 520-pound bombs, or 18-inch torpedo. Yes. The pronounced cathedral to the bottom of the centre section had new ALMCAD and other materials used to it that were first generation on this aircraft. Yeah. It has a lot of various types of materials used in it. Ooh. Every time I read this book, I notice new things, because it's got lots and lots of footnotes beneath the pictures, and lots of various things. And a classic example is this one, the seaplane version of the Ripon. Angus Sunderland, the gull wing was for carrier landings? Yes. Gull wing actually makes things a lot easier for a carrier landings, because it allows you to see where you're landing if you've got a very large obstruction. New Hauser S. But plastic. I suspect they will rebuild it. Finland has a whole load of historical oddities like this in their possession. Then Freeman, money 16040. That's Clark. I think more of a question of what they could do in terms of pushing the envelope, and there was a brisk trade in making small batches of prototypes to keep companies going. Yes, and there is also a brisk trade in nations buying a few of them, so buying a squadron or a flight of aircraft. Andrew Cox, interesting bit of trivia. The military engine type test formed the basis of the old CIA type test, which still forms part of civil certification testing today. Cool. Juno 191. I like how the British Fleet Air Arm fixed the Corsair landing problem with a simple block of wood on the left wing. So simple but effective. They'd spent years dealing with all sorts of weird things from aircraft, trust me. They had ideas of how to fix most things. Melanie 16040. Which BMW did it use again? Okay, so this was for the Spanish, from memory. It was the BMW 132A, which I think was on the fitted to the Spanish variant of the Ripon 2F. Let's see. Variants of the aircraft were tested by the Imperial Japanese Navy, the Imperial Japanese Army, the US Navy, US Army, Finnish, Spanish. Yeah, basically everyone who's everyone tries to test this aircraft out at some point, because it's considered a very reliable, very good aircraft. They just all want it to be tested with different engines. Dr. Daniel Freeman. Was the problem that the Corsair wasn't given a chance of enterprising Americans away from too much oversight to discover the same? More than likely. The thing is, the Americans have a lot of oversight going on for some of their new aircraft. hopefully that has fixed the sound. I do apologise. Somehow it's decided that it was going to use a sound, it connects to a microphone which doesn't exist on my computer. I do not know how, but it has managed to do it. I've managed to get it working. I do not know what happened at all. I didn't press anything. I don't even have that form of microphone. It decided to switch to something called a Griffin microphone. I have a Razor, and that is it. Ay, caramba. Awful notes and lots of static. Okay. How's that? That better? Is this better? Hopefully, that's better. Windows does what Windows wants. Quite probably. Gain is too high. Please go back to the mobile phone. Oh, we will get to the Blackburn, don't worry. Right, we're just about to get to the Mitsubishi. So, the Mitsubishi B2m is a rather cool thing, and Blackburn have a lot of links with Mitsubishi. In fact, you can almost call Mitsubishi, to an extent, the Blackburn's version of Honda if Blackburn is Rover. They do a lot of work developing these things together and developing aircraft and designing things for each other. So it works rather well. Now, just before I get into this one, I am going to answer a couple of questions I was just about to get to. So, before my sound decided to go. Now, Melly1064 was asking very eloquently why the cockpit and why that was a problem on the Vought Corsair. Literally, the engine is a massive thing on the Vought Corsair. And because of the way it's structured in terms of the way the aircraft is laid out, the pilot is behind the engine. In Grumman aircraft, the pilot is almost on top of the engine. And this changes their position in terms of where they're sort of fitting and where they're organised around. So it gives them a lot of differentials in terms of their operating practices. And in terms of landing them, because it's quite so long, because it has such a huge air screw, it does give it problems. Now, back to the lovely Mitsubishi B2m. 9664. So, would that BMW 132 have been a license-built one by Enma? Yes, it would have been. Don't know. Reconnecting the Razor might work. Might work, but Windows might decide to be difficult and insist on sticking with a stupid choice. What happened? What I ended up having to do was, when I reconnected, took out the USBs, the reconnect for the Razor, it then froze XSplit. I then had to organize that, get that back set up, and get it all working out. And now XSplit keeps going, you have updates available for your plugins. And I'm going, I'm in the middle of a live stream. I don't want to do those yet. I don't know. Anyway. General Dynamic. An important tech lesson. If it works, don't touch it. It will break. I wasn't touching it. I was being good. Oh. Right. So, did one of you really tweet put on here, not tweet, did it really message go back to the phone? I don't think my phone's even charged. Probably could do it still, but it isn't charged at the moment. I don't know. Hello, I lost you. Yes, everyone did. The big resolution. Okay, I'll break anyway. You just have to be able to say it's not your fault. You're using XSplit. Yes, me and Drac both use the same software. Mainly because he started using it, and I thought it was. I started off with Streamlabs, and Streamlabs works very well from your phone, but doesn't work very well from a computer. So I use XSplit. Now, the Mitsubishi B2m. Notice the first thing: huge air screw. Notice the second thing: no gull wing. It is developed into an extent of the Ripon, but it is the T7B. The Ripon is the T5. So the T6 doesn't come into existence. No one ever gets a T6. But then they start on the T7. Now, there's two things which are interesting about the Mitsubishi. One, that they come to... Well, three things, actually. Three things that are interesting about Mitsubishi. One, they decide to skip their own design team and come to Blackburn. Two, they're using the Hispano Suiza, but they're U-type engine, and they're that's the specification they're making for, but they are building their own version of it under license. So they're using an under-license engine in an under-license aircraft, but they're building it in Japan. Now, why have they come to Blackburn? Why are they interested in this? Because Blackburn are the absolute best at developing using Alcad and other aluminium alloys at this point. And Mitsubishi want to learn from them because it's building aircraft which are incredibly strong, incredibly durable, and incredibly reliable. And Andrew Cox says it does look far too streamlined for an FAA design. It does. Right. Alright. It's, you know, it's fun. Get anything. I'm going to have fun editing and sorting out the video later. I will edit out a couple of minutes of the silence. Or I might leave it in there and just go, silent section. Dunraganhammer, on the updates, we had to fight with the IT department to please turn off auto update. That or we brought our own computers. Windows wanting to update mid-conference lecture is fun. Yeah. I might have had that fun this morning. Kahaman, sorry for the spammy calls. Don't worry, you haven't caused any spam, as far as I know. Streamline works great when configured properly. It's what I use streaming on Twitch. It can stream to YouTube and Twitch at the same time as well. Cool. It worked well on my phone, Streamlabs. It didn't work well on the laptop. I might try. When I get my PC set up, as I've said before, the whole plan is to, and this is going off topic, but once I get my office in the garden and get my PC set up and my wall of iron brew bottles, then I will maybe try a different software, but I might just try and get all this stuff working properly first. That's good. A good way of learning how to design aircraft. Work with those more experienced, then train yourself essentially, and you get to learn a lot of the latest ideas in the field. Yeah. Probably. This aircraft is kind of cool because it has a range of 1,100 miles at 112 miles an hour. Which, when you start to work out, it means it's sort of able to. It has an endurance of about 9.5 hours. It has. I know I keep using the .303 when I'm talking about machine gun designs for the British. And there's a reason I can afford to get away with that today and not have to put in millimeters everywhere. It's because when I'm talking about the Japanese, they of course are 7.7 millimeter, which is .303. So they're the same size. And one 800 kilogram, or that's 1,764 pound bomb, torpedo, or equivalent weight in bombs. The T7B was built by Blackburn. That ends up crashing in Japan. Uh, 205 aircraft are built across two variants in Japan itself, and they serve on the Kaga, the Akagi, and the Ryo. Andrew Cox, its cruising speed is double that of the Dart. Let's go back to the Dart quickly and check. Not quite double that of the Dart. The Dart's cruising speed is 285 miles at 95 miles an hour. It can outpace the Dart by 17 miles an hour. But more importantly, the Dart runs short at roughly 285 miles. That's still got another 866 miles in it. That's going to outrange the Dart. But that doesn't matter, because at that time you're dealing with the Ripon. And the Ripon has an endurance of 4 hours, 5 hours, depending on type, and has fairly good speed, but also has other extenders being worked on. Dirt Squad Carmen, if you have to apologise for talking about broken audio, I'd hate to know what kind of penance I'll have to do for introducing the praise of certain aircraft. That's why no one has to worry about it. Do you know what I know? What are you running for your laptop, Doctor? I have a lovely old Inspiron 17 7000 series Dell, which I've had for about 4 years, and it is coming up on time. I need to replace it. But that was what I was planning on working at Justin Craig, at the revision company I usually run courses for over the summer, because if I did 3 or 4 weeks for them over the summer, which is what I was planning on doing, that usually gives me living expenses for a couple of months and enough money to buy something like a new laptop. But that hasn't happened, so that's instead being saved up for. Carmen, I remember once a year our cloud storage would go down and we would all be stuck with it saying, yes, it's a virus hitting master computer. Then everyone was like, ever heard of antivirus software? Sorry. Andrew Cox, sorry, the one after the Dart. Okay, let's go back to the Velos. At 67 miles an hour in land plane reconnaissance form. Yep, it is. The Velos is designed for... Well, the Velos is Greek. Okay, let's just leave it to the Greek. But it's lovely. The Velos is designed for cruising around the islands in the Adriatic and the Aegean and basically ambushing people in those spaces. The Mitsubishi B2m is designed to go and hunt and kill from a carrier. Specifically, take out the Americans. So if you end up fighting the Japanese Navy in 1937, this is what will be coming for you. King's Rook, obligatory mechanical question. Did we ever fly any of the Blackburn aircraft? Just wait until we get to a little bit further on. You'll be flying plenty of them. Ian Carr, B2m characteristics of range seem to be reflected in many later Japanese specifications, including World War II. Yep. Carmen, questions. Again, pardon my French, but what's with the landing gear track? Like, holy, I've never seen that wide landing gear track on a biplane before. It's when you're going to be fitting a torpedo centerline on the fuselage. You need it wide and high to make it easy. Because if you think about it, if you've got to slide a torpedo under an aircraft and load it, that's a big, heavy object you need to move in, and you need to have space for people to get in to tie it up and lock it into place and all these things. You end up with a wide landing carriage. You end up with a high landing carriage, literally, for that role. Man in the 16040. Not sure if you saw, but YouTube had suggested, and I watched your video on Mark 14 torpedo before. Loved it. Glad. There are many fiascos. Do you know 1940 191? Streamlabs won't run that. Car Harmon. That's good. After World War I, the Japanese acquired the German Pacific Islands. They needed to range to effectively operate in the Japanese Empire's environment. They usually gave up a lot of things for range. In the Pacific, you give up everything for range. So that's awesome. I'm sorry, had the Ripsaw going for a minute, prior to the Ghost of BT visiting. Had you touched on my engine question? 500 plus horsepower, where if they were NA or were they forced induction? I don't think I have touched on that yet, but I'll get into that in a second. Andrew Cox, wide track also helps when trying to land on a rolling aircraft carrier. That it does. Gordon Collins, hello. Right. The thing about all this, though, is that Mitsubishi are not just getting help from Blackburn in designing the aircraft. One of the things Blackburn does as part of development is they have a go over on the Hispano. So you notice that the Hispano Sousa is 625 horsepower. The Mitsubishi Hispano is 650 horsepower. Well, at least 10 horsepower comes down to the lovely people at Blackburn pointing out to Mitsubishi that, well, have you checked out the refinement on the valve caps? And because they kept, when they were listening to the Hispano Sousa, they kept noticing a rattle going on in it. And they thought if they just refined and smoothed out the rattle, they would gain horsepower. And it turns out they did. By just making the engine actually operate in a smoother fashion, they managed to get it to operate more effectively. Really wide base landing kit. The complaint of Model 2 seems to have been about narrow base for things like the F109 Seafire. Too wide isn't that a problem? It's not a problem. It's just, oh my, it gets wider. So we're now up to the Baffin and the Shark. And if you're going to get to the Baffin and Shark, first you need to look at... Oh, only 16040. Any ideas what was rattling? It was the piston caps. So as the engine was going out around, sort of, and you've got the valve. Okay. So, as the engine's going around, and the valves are going up and down, the pistons are going up and down. The pistons were rattling. They weren't having a nice. They were having enough of a seal to work, but they weren't. They were actually letting out energy and costing energy of the friction they were creating, which was creating a permanent rattle. And when they smoothed them all out, at first they thought it was just the engine they'd been sent, and they got Hispano Sousa to send them a second engine. Same problem. So they get a third engine, and they suddenly look at them and go, "Okay." And so what happens is they take these three engines to Brough Works, and Brough absolutely takes them apart. They already test engines anyway there as part of their works, and they test them propellers. They rebuild the engines, they rebuild the pistons especially, and it comes back and they go, yeah, we're not. When the Japanese are watching them over before Mitsubishi sent to test, we go, wow, that aircraft's doing really well. It's doing better than our calculations. Yeah, we kind of found an extra 15 horsepower just by cleaning up the engines. What? Yeah. And at this point, 15 horsepower actually makes a difference. It knocked a full second and a half off their climb rate, which is a big thing. You mean someone had to teach the Japanese about quality control? That seems ever so ironic. Not really. The Mitsubishi would have got it themselves. But the thing is, there's this supposedly top-of-the-range engine they're buying, and they're going to refine it anyway themselves and do their good quality control. But actually pointing out to them the specs on the pistons seem to be off with the seating of them is, quite a big thing. Money set of 1640. I take it they're multi-piece pistons. Yes. Oh. Right, so now we're on to specifications, and we're now up to 1930 really in the development of things, so let's get into this. Specification M130. The specification that would actually produce the Swordfish, would produce the Shark, the Baffin, and pretty much every single Royal Navy strike aircraft from 1930 onwards would owe itself in some way to this. Now, this specification originally is for a two-seat torpedo bomber. It evolves into a more complicated aircraft, and just before anyone gets worried, the reason why the Fluffy Research Assistant is woofing is because our next door neighbour is sitting in their drive with their engine on. That upsets the Fluffy Research Assistant. He feels if you have a car, he should be sitting in the back of it enjoying himself. The speed at 4,000 feet, with the engines running at maximum permissible RPM, is not to be less than 130 knots. The landing speed is not to exceed 55 knots. The service ceiling is not to be less than 16,000 feet. Tanks permanently included in the fuel system shall be large enough to hold fuel for half an hour at full throttle at sea level, plus 7 hours cruising at 100 knots at 4,000 feet, while carrying a military load of 2,874 pounds. The capacity of the oil and reserve water tanks shall be sufficient for 8 hours cruising at the above conditions. And that pretty much describes the entire British approach to endurance. Now, let's see. 1640, Denver. I was hearing 15 horsepower, which would also make a difference in your vehicle. It was 15 horsepower, not 50. Scott, Denver. Would the enhanced power from the tuning mean that the engines wouldn't have to be run as hard and would last longer before breakdown failures? Yes. Frederick, the Fluffy Researcher System wants attention. He always wants attention. Melanie 16040, lol, any suitably rated type of British engine. I am, yeah, yeah. Yes, and basically that means it has to be a British-built engine, but it has to have already completed a 100 hours test. Now, the 100 hours test, as I said, the interesting thing is they give examples of engines, and neither of those engines are used. And as I said in the video, Long Patrol, the reason was because actually any maker worth their salt could do that test within a week. Possibly they would be long and extend it for 2 weeks, but they could actually keep those things going and keep them and have a test running non-stop. Also, one of my favourite things to do when I'm teaching students is my university has access to some video which shows one of the first Merlin engines blowing up, being tested, and it's actually being blown up on purpose because they are testing it to see at what point can you make it go boom. And they've got it on the stand, they're running it at full throttle, and boom, it goes up. Martin Dock, Fluffy Research Assistant set off my 2 fluffy dunces. Sorry, he is called the King of Puppies. Right, You're looking for piston rings. They were non-existent prior to World War II. Look at old Jeep footage. It shows it well with the two-stroke smoke out of the tailpipe. Exactly. But if piston rings are post-World War II method of getting around it, pre-World War II, they are trying to make everything as precisely as possible. Melanie 1640, reserve water tanks. Was this an unpressurized cooling system? Originally, that's what they thought it would be anyway. The engine types they eventually are looking for end up being pressurized, some of them. And there are also others which, how do I put it, go for air-cooled engines. And that's mainly where they end up going to save on space and weight. Calm Gasson, re 55 knots landing speed. They weren't supposed to bring back torps. No, they were supposed to bring back a torpedo and still be able to land at 55 knots. There's no point wasting a torpedo. You bring your weapons back. You can land at 55 knots. To be fair, a swordfish could land at slower than 55 knots. In car, Pegasus engine is not this. Interesting enough? No, but it will be featured a second later. Greg Sarsky, M130 predates the Pegasus, I think, just. Just. Possibly. It hadn't yet been done the full military testing yet. Let's put it this way. Germac, World War II, not to exceed 55 knots. Yeah. So, Swordfish could land very, very slowly. But so could the M130. 825 horsepower Rolls-Royce Buzzard 3 MS. Dimensions, span 49 feet 6 inches. 18 feet 7 inches for folded. And length of 39 foot 10 inches. Height 14 foot 7 inches. So well within the standards. All up weight, 10,000 pounds. Slightly on the heavy side there. Armament, 1 18-inch torpedo or 551-pound bombs, 1 fixed forward machine gun, 1 aft on a ring, maximum speed at 152 miles an hour, range 750 miles. That's pretty cool. And it's very cool for 1930. So basically, when you're thinking about the Mitsubishi B2m, it's got a maximum of 132 miles an hour with the torpedo and a range of 1100 miles at 112. This has a maximum speed of 152 miles an hour with that torpedo, but its range is 750 miles. So it's got a slightly different operating characteristics. But they're the sort of equivalents. Juno 199. We won't be talking about the Naval BF 109 tonight. Right, no. Maybe we're talking about the Skewer and the Rock, but not now. Not for a few slides yet. Not for a few slides yet. Jeff Beeler, what were the reasons and how did Aaron Henderson justify bringing Squadrons to the Fleet Air Arm? Basically, he sat there and he said, so are we attacking in groups of 6? Oh no, we're organising in groups of 4 or 5 flights for some attacks, but usually at least 2 flights. So we're attacking in squadron strength. Yes, but we have no squadron officers. No. Right then. So with that in mind, Henderson invited the Defence Select Committee and various other people out to his aircraft carrier, sat them down and had that conversation with them. And within a week, the Air Ministry was told that the Fleet Air Arm was now going to be organised along squadron lines, with squadron commanding officers and squadron leaders. And, most importantly, squadron engineering officers, which was a critical function. Because at that point, they'd had wing commanders, air group commanders, wing commanders, air group sort of wing leaders, and wing engineers. And everything was put on 3 central people, and all the rest were flights. So you had lost a whole level of management. And if you think about it, if you don't make this change in 1933... where do a lot of your senior officers who are so critical in World War II come from? Because if your senior leader is a flight leader, and then after that they go off somewhere and they do another career, and then maybe they come back as your air group commander, you have a problem. Melanie 16040. This makes me think of a video scene of 2 people on the top wing of a Antonov AN-2 hitting a tennis ball back and forth as it trundles along at like 30 knots. Yeah. Nick Waters, Sims. I wonder about this. Do they get pickier about the best pilots, and does the time practice and landings greatly reduce their fighter bomber practice zone? Not necessarily, actually. What it is to an extent is that the Fleet Air Arm becomes self-selecting. You have to be a very good pilot in order to be able to really do landing on aircraft carrier, because if you consider it, your airfield is there and you're landing, and that's complicated enough. But now, let's have your airfield being aircraft carrier. Down on you. Basically, this thing, it's going from side to side as the waves move. It's going up and down because the waves move. It's actually turning itself, maybe, to focus in the wind. And so it's... yeah, it's fun. So it becomes sort of self-selecting. Melanie 1640. When did they make this change again? They made the change to squadrons in 1933, from being flight organised to squadrons. Angus Arnold, squadron unit formation sounds sensible. It does. And what's interesting, of course, is the Royal Naval Air Service had been very much a squadron organised formation. And then the the Royal Air Force was formed, the RNAS and all the Flying Corps become part of it. And they decide, right then, for carrier operations, it's got to be flights. You're not allowed squadron commands. Your short runway moves unexpectedly. That is also the other thing. I should really have done this. If that's my land runway, my aircraft carrier runway should be sort of like that. You know, it's this part of my fingers here. Re-carrier landings, not to mention the carrier leaves vortexes behind as it has a big object moving through air. Yep. In Vietnam, the US did stress test on pilots. Their heart rates were at max, not when being shot at, but during landing. That really doesn't surprise me. So, the other option is the B5 Baffin. Now, remember we've talked about the Ripon. Well, the Ripon is lovely, but it has some issues. The main issue being it's currently powered by a huge, great big liquid-cooled engine. And there is this really cool engine coming out from Bristol called the Pegasus. Yes, so you're right. The Pegasus 2 M3 has arrived. The Pegasus 2 is here. And you end up with an aircraft with 45-foot, 6.5-inch extended span, a 70-foot, 10-inch fold, a length of 38-foot, 9.75 height of 12 feet, 10 inches, all up weight of 7,710 pounds with a 3,070 pound military load. Crew of up to 2, capable of carrying one 18-inch torpedo or 1,600 pounds of bombs, a maximum speed of 125 miles per hour at 6,500 feet. I've added an extra 0 after that, not 65,000 feet, 6,500 feet. Sorry about that one. And a range 3.5 hours at 5,000 feet. And this one goes and serves Baffin. You can all be very afraid right now. Gar Harmon, one for Bill Trumps, The History and Future of Naval Food. Ooh, cool. Melanie 16040, you said something about the problem regarding the officers going off something, or what was it? Again, well, because of the way the Fleet Air Arm in the 1920s and early 1930s was constructed, you had a flying officer had a dual rank. They'd have their rank in the Royal Navy and their rank in the Air Force. And the two wouldn't necessarily coalesce. So you might find a lieutenant commander in the Royal Navy would be only a flying officer in the Fleet Air Arm. And occasionally you'd find a lieutenant in the Royal Navy would be a flight lieutenant or senior in the Royal Air Force because of some various reasons. It was very rare those happened, but those are examples you can give. So you get to a certain rank as a naval officer, and you'd have to go off and do sea time. You'd have to go all these things in order to progress. So you disappear off to another place. And because there are no squadron commanders around, there are no roles for you to do command roles. You're either doing a flying role, a pure flying role, or you're doing a carrier air group role. You're not doing your intermediate command role. So they had a real difficulty getting back officers to be the carrier air group commanders. They were generating all these flight lieutenants to lead these flights, but then they had no level above. So it's kind of like, let's say your squadron is the equivalent of your infantry company, a company of infantrymen. So you've got your captain or major in charge of your company. And you have your company divided up. You normally have your company divided up into platoons, and then you have it divided up into squads with maybe ensigns or subalterns in charge, with senior sergeants really running show, but a subaltern there as well. So imagine if you take out the platoon leadership, all the lieutenants in that company, you just have it be organised as squads and a captain up above. And what happens is the sub-lieutenants, after they finish their time with their squad, they go off and do another job in another part of the service. Maybe driving, let's say they go off and fly helicopters or fire artillery or something like that. And then, afterwards, you then go, I need one of you to come back and be the company commander. Well, they've just spent the last 4 or 5 years developing themselves in another career. You're now asking them to give that up and go back and basically start from the bottom again. It causes trouble. Yes, there are ones who love to fly, so they'll jump at it like a shot, but they're rare and more difficult to get. GWT picked. Joined rather late, but if you want to learn about carrier landings and difficult landings, look up Eric Winkle Brown, FA, test pilot. Holds the record for most carrier landings. Yes, I would recommend that, and to be fair, I've got all his books in this room around me. In fact, yes, I have got all his books in this room around me at the moment. None of them have currently been nicked by my mother. For those who don't know the history of that, my mum does have a habit of nicking my books. She likes her history as well. And The good thing about Eric Winkle Brown is you always have to remember that he credited his survival and all his ability to fly to being so short, because he felt that made him far safer than it did his colleague who were taller when it was an accident. Dev Squad, how do modern carrier pilots line up for an off-angle landing on a moving airship? It sounds like a very difficult proposition. I guess it explains why they get paid more. Pretty much you have a lot of very high-tech technology to try and point it out. You also have something called a mirrored landing site, which does help you predict your route in, but that's been phased out now in favour of more digital options. And, of course, you have the Royal Navy carrier operation options of it's Vistal, so instead of you trying to land like that, you can land vertically. You can do a rolling landing as well, and a rolling takeoff. And they do those, but it's slightly more a case of we're pretty much almost stopped and then rolling on. Right, so, the Baffin. Apart from it definitely not being 65,000 feet, they're a very cool aircraft. And as I said, the New Zealanders get them. They are also one of the first mass-produced aircraft to use the Pegasus. And they use it from an aircraft carrier. So, when the Royal Navy is looking at the Fairy TSR, what becomes Swordfish, and they see Pegasus, they know that's a name they can trust. Andrew Cox, according to the Urban Dictionary, Baffin nowadays means ridiculous or crazy. That wouldn't surprise me. Melanie 1640, I think I've got at least one of Jane's books I just saw on your shelf. Yeah, I covered these in brew ships yesterday, and all the Brassies ones as well. I've still got to update the brew ships with the links to the books, but that'll be going on there at some point, probably tomorrow. Dirt Squad. Very interesting man. Flew to comment even after the Germans told him was suicidal. Yes, but that's Winkle Brown for you. He also flew Wildcats, or Martlets as they were called, off a escort carrier. And managed to talk himself out of being captured by the Germans at the beginning of World War II, because he was in Germany and he managed to get himself driven in his car to the Swiss border. And he gets into Switzerland and he gets home from Switzerland to the UK. Manly 16040. Do they still have the guy at the back controlling the lights? Well, they still have a landing officer who is looking at all the things and is trying to line them up. And yes, they do tend to have the light options as the backup options if the digital thing doesn't work. Carl Harmon. My father gets annoyed. I acquire his books and read them and keep them. I merely rehome them and show them some love. He never is. Oh. Right then. So, now it's the Shark. And the Shark is the actual entry that they end up putting forward against the Swordfish. So, this aircraft ends up being built by Canada. Oh, and this is the one which is failed and still roughly 300 are built. Okay? Roughly 300. It's 10% either way it's within. So, that's why I'm going for the 300. One 800 horsepower Pegasus 3. A span of 46 feet, a 15 feet folded span, length of 35 foot 3 inches. All up, very good. Torpedo in land mode, 17 miles. Reconnaissance in land form, 829 miles. Over tank fitted in land, overload tank fitted, 1,260 miles. And by the way, those land and sea stands for land plane version, or seaplane is when they have the floats fitted. So this is what lost to the Swordfish. And it lost to the Swordfish and still equipped Squadrons. 810, 820 and 821 and 822 on Furious. And also operated from Repulse and Warspite. You'll also notice that the upper main plane is both set forward and is larger and longer than the lower main plane, which is slightly gold-winged. So the Shark is a really gorgeous looking aircraft. You know, it is a really good looking aircraft, I'd say, the Blackburn Shark, to me. It's one of those ones which I feel has been a bit sort of forgotten. And unfairly so. Later models of it even had a cockpit fitted. What do you say? You even have some protection from the elements. And for those who were asking me already earlier, what aircraft served with the Royal Canadian, the Canadians, 4 of these aircraft, and it is the Shark. It is in fact this one, the Shark 3 of the Royal Canadian Air Force. Have a look at that beautiful aircraft. I'll put that down there. Yep. There are various comments going on. Let's see. We have GLT picked. Doug Clark scored a few kills against FW200 Condors doing so. Yes, it did. Nick Waters, that engine does look extended and exposed. Yep. But it's the same for all the Pegasus ones. Some built by Boeing Canada. Arthur Donald, I've seen a displayed Swordfish at a local museum. They did the job, but they do look so frail. Ah, yes, but as someone else pointed out, they were dive bomber certified, and they did do dive bombing. In fact, to quote recently, if you had listened to the recent video on Draxdon on Narvik, a seaplane swordfish out from HMS Warspite actually dive bombed the submarine and managed to sink it. One of the few times the 100-pound anti-submarine bomb actually worked. Take care, Chainloof. How would both the shark and the swordfish compare to the Devastator from 1935? Honestly, they're both a lot more reliable. But they're both built in 1933. So they're 2 years earlier. The swordfish were dive bomb certified. Yes, and the sharks. Both of them were dive bomb capable. Well, it was going very, very slow at the time when it was diving down. Remember, if we go back to... There is this beautiful phrase in this thing. Stability. Yeah. The aircraft, when flying in its full loaded condition, shall have positive stability in all axes, respond quickly to the controls, and be fully controllable at any speed, especially near a stall and during a steep dive, when it shall have no tendency to hunt. Now, that is basically code for it's not going to try and kill us at all when we throw it into a steep dive. That's what they're talking about when they're saying no tendency to hunt. And that was the critical thing.
We counted 4,400.
Now, before anyone wonders what I'm quickly doing, I'm quickly setting up for the next aircraft. Because, yes, the next aircraft is the Blackburn. Tendency to hunt means that they had a tendency for the aircraft to decide to go its own way. So the aircraft didn't want to they didn't want an aircraft which would go, ooh, I'm going to feel like I'm going there or there. It had to be dead. It had to be exactly where you pointed it is where it was going to want it to go. Calm guys, but I really saw a fish dive on it. I found they used rockets from canvas-winged biplanes, which made me stop mid-air. Praying. Probably. They also used rockets to help let the aircraft help take very heavily laden swordfish off. Angus Ross. So, like Angus asked, why were there only 300 sharks made? It's pretty much because they're focusing in on swordfish, and they're starting to build albacore, and then they're building barracuda, and they've got all these other things going on. You need to focus in, and you focus in on to smooth down productions. In car, why build both the shark and swordfish? Were there reservations for both? They wanted to test both out, and that basically they test them and they decide the swordfish is the slightly better option. Very. I guess that both the swordfish and shark would get mauled by zeros if found unescorted. If the zeros could go slow enough to engage them, yes. Now I can feel. Now I can see the Blackburn family resemblance. Ah, okay. Or hail our Lord and Savior, the Blackburn. Jeremy, may I put forward that I made and posted a profile of this one on Discord? Oh, God help us all. Well, you see the little thing. I kid you not. Go along from here, there. You will see there's sort of a thing blopping up between just underneath the top main plane. There is this little bubble point. That's the pilot. And no, I don't think he can see to do anything. I think he's just sitting. I'm literally sitting there going, "Don't make me land her." Yeah, the Fleet Air wasn't for the faint of heart. No. Near 1640. Oh boy, that knows. Nick Waters, the front end angles. Just worked out, it reminds me of the Wessex. It reminds me of many things. Dope Squad, King's Rook, that I can't answer. Why was the swordfish preferred over the shark? It comes down to ease of maintenance, because the shark had the classic ease of maintenance in terms of its engines and fuels spaces that Blackburn had perfected, but Fairy copied that for the swordfish as well. But what the swordfish also had was ease of access at certain other points, thanks to the shaping they'd used. Plus, there is the fact that the shark uses more metal in its design, so it's for a very similar operation, but the shark does use more materials. And more advanced materials, so the swordfish comes out slightly cheaper and slightly quicker and easier to build. Just slightly, and it's enough of edge that over 1,000 aircraft it gives you an advantage. Don G, I can't help feeling that thing was designed to get senior officers ashore in comfort. Actually, no, it's designed to allow an observer to spread out a very large map. Jeffy, I assume the advantage of the Blackburn's navigator's cabin was outweighed by the disadvantages. Basically, yes. And in the end, when you're building an aircraft for your air group, you want it to be as capable as possible, because you can only take so many aircraft with you. Which is why multi-role general-purpose aircraft start off as naval aircraft, because when you can just build another airfield, and literally that's what they do in World War II. They just build more airfields. An aircraft carrier can't do that, so every aircraft it takes with it has to be useful. And if your aircraft's sole role is pre-radar, so it's only visual range, spotting, reconnaissance, and airborne early warning, that's not really worth it when you can carry an aircraft which can do 75% of that role plus 100% of the torpedo strike and bombing role. Jeff Beeler, I seem to have done that. Angerson, wow, that plane is ugly. Every time I see it, it's like smelling salty eyes all over again. I'm managing to not look at it. It's a skill, but I'm managing to focus on the chat almost entirely. Zero's chasing swordfish reminds me of that scene in The Simpsons where the Orville brothers' plane gets stolen. It would have been interesting. I wouldn't have wanted to be in the swordfish, but, you know, they could have had some fun with them. In card, Japanese Val torpedo bomber could also be mauled by Allied fighters when unescorted. Pretty much any torpedo bomber trying to do a torpedo attack unescorted is going to get mauled. Ed so the pilot's the one behind the wings? No, he's the one in front of the wings. Just beneath the top. The one behind the wings you can see is the navigator, observer. Jack, before this, with its enclosed navigator cabinet, it looked like something from an adventure novel, used by a pair of main protagonists to hop around the Mediterranean and chase some smuggler Indiana Jones style. Yeah. For Blue Shirt Buddha, hello! Who thought this aircraft was a good idea? Someone who wanted them to be basically plotting how to target battleship guns. Juno 191, if you've ever seen Star Wars, is this how they tested someone to see if the Force is in the fleet air arm? Potentially. They got a specialist gunnery spotting aircraft. What other countries just use adapt existing types? Seems like a luxury. Yes, but you are talking about, and this is a point I'm making, the fleet air arm in the 1920s and 1930s is the largest fleet air arm in the world. For most of the time running up to World War II, the Royal Navy has the most aircraft carriers and the most aircraft in the world. The others have it. The others are theoretically the U.S. Navy theoretical peer. The Japanese are on there as well. But when it actually comes to practical aircraft in aircraft carriers that are working, and aircraft that are working from the aircraft carriers, the Royal Navy is the world leader. And for a while, this looks like a very effective use of its aircraft, because the best thing for killing ships at that time is the battleship. That's the best ship killing weapon. What's the best way of improving that ship's killing weapon? Give it the most accurate targeting information. Most accurate targeting information available at the time? I'll give you... Ba-da! God, that was well lined up. You know, that's what the Blackburn was about. Angerson, were there redundant flight controls in second cockpit? We hope, but I don't think there were that many. Jayla, the Blackburn has a fuselage resembling a submarine conning tower. If you say so. Gary Mingy, I see Dragonfly camera. Why this is not a news design? I want one. Gary Mingy. Hello, Gary. Isn't that inside the windows cam? The navigator has a map table inside the windows, and then he has the rear cockpit, which he can go and get star shots and all sorts of things to accurately position themselves. And there's also a gun out the back at the bottom, which the telegraphist air gunner can use. Yes, it has machine guns. They did think it would be capable of dogfighting. They actually gave the pilot a machine gun. It's got a maximum speed of 225 miles an hour. Admittedly, well, that's the Skewer. No, we're out onto the Skewer. I was sort of going, can't go, that's wrong. It has a maximum speed of 122 miles an hour at 3,000 feet. Please note there are torpedo bombers at this time which could outpace it. Force A1, the most beautiful aircraft I've ever seen. Have you had your eyes tested recently? Angus Son, a fuselage that only a mother engineer could love. Possibly. I'm not even sure if that would happen. Look. There. So Ganser is a truly wonderful vision. I'd rather be a swordfish than a Blackburn squared. Daniel Freeman. You know. It's Blackburn, 2 pounds. Look at that one. Look, they're so handsome. Oh, God. Oh, this is definitely a low point. Or a high point, depending on my perspective. I'm going to go for a high point. I think the Arthur Donald. Hello, Arthur. I think the navigator may have had a better landing view than the pilot. I think quite possibly they did as well. Sorry, did you just call this a practical aircraft? There was some pragmatic reasoning behind it, but a practical from a flying perspective, no. But it was actually very practical from the point of view of logistics and engineering, because it uses all the same systems as the Dart. So therefore, the Royal Navy was getting the equivalent of a torpedo spotter reconnaissance, while still having a torpedo bomber aircraft and a spotter reconnaissance aircraft. So this is your spotter reconnaissance aircraft. The Dart was the torpedo bomber. And basically, the Swordfish is when they go, we'll do a torpedo spotter reconnaissance, and we'll combine the two. So that's how we get around the need for, logistic support. Where is the crewman number 3? Where is inside it somewhere? Or, well, actually, you can see that if you look at the bottom picture, this one, you can actually see one of the machine gun, the lower machine gun is extended, so he's probably lying in a prone position on the floor. JP, the Blackburn was designed for accurate long-range reconnaissance, knowing exactly where that plane is important. Yep. To be fair, if you fly a Blackburn over an enemy ship while shooting at them, they will consider the aircraft a bigger threat to their sanity than merely being blown up. Potentially. Melanie 16040. Telegraphist gunner what? Okay, so the telegraphist air gunner, i.e. you were the radio operator and the guy who fired the machine gun. That was the role. So you would have, let's say in a Swordfish, you would have the pilot, you would have the observer navigator, the pilot would be, by 1933 there was a 70% chance they'd be Royal Navy, a 30% chance they'd be Royal Air Force. The observer corps, who were always Royal Navy, their job was to deal with the navigation of the aircraft and to deal with identifying the enemy ships, and act as the gunner and telegraphist and the radio operator if that is not being carried. But if they are on if they're on a torpedo mission and they've got the extra fuel tank loaded, then the observer goes into the telegraphist air gunner's cockpit right at the back with a machine gun, and his cockpit gets filled with a fuel tank. But if he's not there, there's a guy behind him, and the guy behind him is the radio operator, so the observer can do the observing and pointing out where the shot's landing, and the radio operator can send the messages back to the ship. But if there's an enemy fighter comes in, he stops sending the radio messages, grabs the machine gun, the observer takes over sending the messages whilst telling the ship what he sees, and the telegraph air gunner is going trying to keep them off his Swordfish. So that's their sort of role. So the telegraphist air gunner is what they're called, or TAG. Do you know one? Hold up, they gave him a machine gun. 2. One firing forward for the pilot and one below. Re-giving the pilot a machine gun. If they're given a pistol, they're likely to shoot themselves. Coming out, long range recon and then direct ex-Australia Hungarian and then torpedo in Greek boats at a hapless target. Yeah. Gaming, hi, I want a gun. Yes, machine gun. Grenades would be fun. Do you know what? My god, it's close. Blackburn. Of course they gave my pilot a machine gun. The enemy must remain terrified of me. Oh, stuff awesome. 2253. We can do better, everyone. Thank you. Jeremy, machine gun is for strafing the pirate junks. Possibly. Did it do good at least? It did its job very well. But there was no repeats. Dr. Clark, go with audience engagement. I do occasionally. 471. The Blackburn is the Knitzer hazard. Simply looking at it will cause harm. Oh god. Oh, why did I agree to this? Oh, it's fun. And I'm laughing so hard I'm crying. Then. The Ben Grogan. Hello, Ben. I don't think I've seen you before today. The Blackburn Bagel looks more like it's from Dr. Seuss' book of a man high on acid describing a plane to a child. Possibly. I feel like the Blackburn was designed by an engineer looking at a list of requirements with no reference to a designer or anyone who had ever heard of aerodynamics. It was crewman free. The other two lost the bet. I like slow planes. What's the stall speed? If you have a crash, 75 miles an hour is a lot better than 100 miles an hour. Well, the top speed is 122 miles an hour. Its cruising speed is 103.5 miles an hour. And the lowest it was recorded flying was about 40. Well, I think it was clocked down at just under 40 knots, and I'm working at 9 miles an hour, but I think it's about 45, 50, 46 miles an hour. Okay. Back in actually, I would say it looks like a cross between a parrot and a parrot, possibly. Hang on. 3 days after the very last Blackburn was decommissioned, it reassembled itself and took off into the heavens, but never landed. That wouldn't surprise me again. 471. The Blackburn B123, however, especially in its initial T-tail design, was definitely a good-looking aircraft. They did a few. Melanie 1640. Dr. Clark. So the tag gets to make cool shooty noises before they get shot down. Pretty much. They get to grab a Lewis gun, or a similar machine gun, which is unpowered and on a ring, and so they can swing round, and they can tilt it at sort of angles and basically just fire it, and hope they hit something. But some of them were actually very, very good shots, and in fact a few ended up with Marines ashore on occasion. They found that these were machine gunners who could really take off targets. And at one point there is I think it's in Crete, there's some tail air gunners were there, and the Germans wrote a report that they thought that the British had some machine gun snipers. And it was some Royal Navy tail air gunners. Gary, even if you don't hit them, you give them something to think about. A diversion. Pretty much. Chris asking, Dr. no repeats. I like to think someone at the Air Ministry said something like, never again. Dan Freeman, how did the Blackburn not get banned on the Geneva Conventions? It was that they didn't build any more. 16040. So this aircraft entered service in 1921. The same year it was shown that battleships are perhaps not the best way to think at Ostfriesland. Well, the thing was, Ostfriesland scenario, the battleship wasn't... Okay, the trouble with a lot of the testing, especially in the 1920s of aircraft versus battleships, is that both sides tend to rig the debate. So if you want to sink it, you go with bombs, you drop those bombs very close where you've got no air defense and the battleship's doing no damage control and all its things are open. Or if you want to show that they won't hit it, you have them dropping dummy bombs from a massively long range away and the ship is maneuvering at high speed. And that's the trouble with it. The most accurate testing is actually done by the Royal Navy in the Mediterranean, and they're still building these things in 1921. And I say most accurate testing relative for the time. Was the big roundel on the slab side of fuselage an advantage? They claimed it was. We'll just keep on the Blackburn until I've answered all the Blackburn questions. Ben Grogan. Does that mean with gusting sea winds it was the first helicopter? Yeah. Blue Ship Butter. Was the Blackburn the shipping case that the Swordfish came in? No. Do you know one? So where's the tea making station? It is a standard issue on everything British Armed Forces. Actually, you are not actually wrong on this one. She did actually have the facilities to. She did have. They were fitted with hot water and other systems because it was felt for long flights they would need tea to keep themselves awake, and coffee. So they literally do have. And it's, I'm told it's port side, but underneath the front, port side front window is where it is. Take care, Tim Sims. Have a nice supper. Melanie 1640. Why was the roundel to be an advantage? Because at least it meant that people knew which side she was on, so she wouldn't get shot down by her own pilot, own side. Michael Sweck, hello. Hope the pilot doesn't suffer from agoraphobia. No. Constituents, have any survived? Not as far as I know. Do you know one? There's someone named Blackburn in here, lol. Yes, there is. I'm presuming it's not Daniel Freeman at the moment. Right then, the Skewer. Well, we are now going on to the Skewer because there is only so long. Is that Edmund Hillary in the cockpit? What's the duration of aircraft? Okay, we'll quickly go back to that. She roughly 4.5 hours, 4 3/4 hours. It was her endurance. As I said, I don't think Blackburn is a Daniel anymore. So here's the Skewer. Now, this is the biggest what-if aircraft of World War II because I honestly believe that if the Royal Navy had had another year of production and another year of peace to get this right, this would have been the aircraft which you would have seen Blackburn really fly in the understandings of what their aircraft were capable of. Because the Skewer was an absolutely excellent dive bomber. Okay? Its fuselage is flush riveted Alcad, stress skin construction. The wings also stress skin construction. It's built in 3 units, so it's easy to repair. It has a Bristol Mercury 9 engine in its first versions, and its next versions have the Bristol Perseus 12 engine. It's bang on for everything. Admittedly, I have to admit the 4.303 forward-firing Browning machine guns with 600 rounds each is a little bit, how'd I put it? Well, I can understand why they went with 4 and 600. But myself, I would have gone with probably 6 guns and 400 rounds for each gun. Because they could take it. They could deal with the weight and they could manage that out. You know, anything to give them... If you are going to stick an aircraft which is armoured to an extent, so it's going to take a couple of hits to get hit, you need firepower because it can't outturn. And that's the thing. It's very manoeuvrable in a dive. It's very good, accurate in a dive. But it's not going to outturn a ME-109 or something like that. So you need to give an advantage elsewhere. And that advantage best could be given in firepower. Don't worry, Blackburn. You come back in the end in the summary section. Melanie 1604. What was the endurance of the aircraft? 4 hours. They couldn't go without tea for 4 hours. That was what they felt at the time. Don't get me started. Okay, don't get me started. JBL, onboard coffee and tea kettle. The Blackburn rules. The Skewer. Do you know what I've heard? Well, questionable things about it from Arc Royal pilots. There were issues with it. The in-car, did Blackburn change their designer after the Skewer, as no late wartime aircraft seem to have any sort of success? Well, they still keep producing decent aircraft, but what happens is they end up getting into making... Basically, Blackburn produce 2 fighters. Well, 3, counting what comes next. The Skewer, the Rock, and the Firebrand. And eventually the Sea Fury as well, I think. Well, they're involved in it. But, you know, you have Hawker and Blackburn are sort of to an extent competing. Sea Fury versus Firebrand. And this is the Firebrand. Now, this can carry a torpedo. It's back to the single-seater aircraft which can carry a torpedo for Blackburn. So it really is back to their, you know, knowledge. And it's a really, really good aircraft. But, you know, it takes a while to develop it. It takes a while to get there. And the Skewer is... They picked the 890 horsepower Bristol Perseus. If they'd managed to get it built with a Merkel, it could have been far, far more capable. And they would have been given those engines if they'd had a year's more peace. Ian Carr, Skewer shot down the first aircraft in World War II and sank the German cruiser Königsberg. Yes, the Skewer achieved quite a lot in World War II, but it gets forgotten. Andrew Cox, Re 600 RPG. For a fleet defense fighter, you probably want endurance so you don't have to keep changing caps. That's a theory to an extent, but honestly, they burn through them so quickly that, you know... And the thing is, yes, you can say, I can have more bullets, but if you're firing more bullets at a certain time, so if you're increasing your actual rate of fire by 50%, you're increasing your chance of hitting the target even more. So, you know, that's the sort of the, you know, what you're playing off against it. The 4 303 Browning machine guns in the Skewer have a bit over 30 seconds of ammunition. Yeah. Nick Waters, Firebrand looks like it should have been great. It wasn't, was it? It was actually quite good, But the trouble is, it's built to be a torpedo attack fighter, and it comes out after the Second World War when we're in the transition period to missiles. So, if it's going to sound strange, if the Second World War had continued versus the Russians, i.e., it hadn't stopped with Germany and it had continued, the Firebrand would have come into service and would have probably been absolutely excellent. But what happens is there's all the issues which comes after the Second World War. It's kind of like the Skewer has all the issues prior to the Second World War. The Firebrand has all the issues post the Second World War. Some companies do well when there's a lot of different engineering coming in. Other companies are trying to constantly be at the front. So Blackburn always want to try and be at the front, and they traditionally have been at the front. But that's been in the 1920s and 30s when it's been rather stayed. Once you get the frenzy of pre-World War II, they get issues. But they still develop some good aircraft. Don't get me wrong. The Shark is very good. And then you have the frenzy of the end of what they're just getting used to World War II. They're producing these good aircraft in World War II. And then World War II ends. And there's another frenzy. And that mucks them up again. Blackburn did build many swordfish during the war. Phenomenal. Pretty, but you won't be able to build them with workers plucked from the local furniture shop. Nope. That's good. Your audio broke up slightly when you said the preferred engine name for the Skewer. It's the Bristol Perseus 12. That's the preferred engine for the Skewer. Full say, didn't the Sea Fury have a third commander? I seem to remember the Air Ministry tried to get English Electric to build the Folon Foe. They tried to get them to build all sorts of things, but the Air Ministry, by that point, the Air Ministry found that they had little to no control at all over the Admiralty procurement. Admiralty procurement, what the Air Ministry did to the Admiralty when they were still assisting them in 1939 and 1940 in shutting down production of their aircraft and writing reports which basically said you didn't need these aircraft even in low rate production, meant that the Royal Navy didn't trust them at all. And basically the Air Ministry's justification of that was to focus on the Battle of Britain, and you can understand them. There is a legitimate reason for them making that claim. But the way they went about doing it, probably because actually, you see, the thing is, some historians consider them to have malicious intent. I consider it more they're hurrying about making these reports and they're doing this whole thing, and it happens, and then they only realise afterwards that the way that that can be inferred by the Admiralty going, basically, you want to cut our aircraft. And the Admiralty has to fight to even keep the Swordfish in production, the Albacore in production, the Fulmar in production. It can't keep the Skewer in production as well. And it would really like to, because think about this. Think about Britain with a functioning dive bomber being built in the at the beginning of World War II. Think of how that might affect North Africa. Think about how that might affect Crete. How that might affect so many others. Yes, not a good fighter. And frankly, the thing sitting here, even worse fighter. Arguably one of the worst fighter designs ever created according to man, and should be blackened from the earth. But leaving that to one side, scorched and forgotten. But no, it's there. And it is there, and it's part of history, and we need to learn from it. But the thing is, that's what the Navy sort of has to deal with that, and so they just, at that point, post-Second World War, they're just ignoring it, at the Air Ministry entirely. Juno 191, I know Ark Royal still had Skewer when she was sunk. Yep, they were hanging around. They were still useful. Then Spitfire carried 350 rounds per gun. They were the same gun. And the same rate of fire was a smidge under 1,200 rounds per minute. Yeah. So, 400 rounds per gun, 6 guns would have been... Okay. Ben Grogan, I might be skipping too far ahead, but is it true that the Griffon-engined aircraft late war had issues with engine torque, making them crash very easily? It did cause fun. Jermac, wasn't the issues with the Firebrand being hard to control? Let's put it this way, it did hunt a bit. Juno 109, torpedo attack fighter. With how big that thing is and how underpowered it is. Yeah. It broke up when he was saying what engine they could have got within another year of peace. Okay, with another year of peace, they could have probably... They could have got there was a 950 version of the 950 horsepower version of the Perseus, and there was also a Merlin engine variant being looked at, which would have given them 1,200 to 1,300 horsepower. If they had got that at the same time as the Fulmar had entered service with also a Merlin, and so they'd had Fulmars, Skewers on Merlins, and they'd had what they were looking at and possibly was various options for the Albacore, especially when they had peacetime production. They might well have gone with that with a Merlin as well. You could have had a very different air group within a year or two. Or they could have all gone with the very, very uprated, possibly getting to, well, let's put it this way. Well, they could well have got upgraded to the Bristol Hercules, or even the Bristol Centaurus, which come about not that much later. If you consider the Bristol Centaurus runs in 1930, it has first been developed in 1938. And that could well have been used for various things. And the Centaurus, well, that would have given them an increase in horsepower of up to 2,500 horsepower. So variants of the Centaurus go up to 2,500 horsepower. They could have been upgraded to a significantly faster, significantly more powerful engine, and that would have had a big difference on the Skewer and a big difference on pretty much everything else available. Death Squad, sorry, not the one it was built with. The one you said it would have been a lot better with. Basically, if it had had time, it was going to be upgraded to the Hercules or the Centaurus. They were looking at various types using it. And that would have been sensible. And if you consider the Centaurus is the aircraft engine which eventually is fitted onto the Sea Fury, the Tempest, the Tornado, or the Fury, of course, and the Firebrand, and the Beverley, and the Firecrest. So it's something which they were quite happy to use. The Rock, Jeff Beeler, the Rock wasn't used as a dive bomber. It was not used as a dive bomber. It was just a fighter. Ian Carr, are you planning a similar episode on Fairy? Maybe at some point in the future. Nick Waters, so were the Air Ministry suggesting that they just take whatever the RAF had and beef up the undercarriage? Oh wait, looks at the Seafire. Pretty much. The Blackburn Rock. Evidence of convergent evolution with the Bolton Paul Defiant. And that evolution can end up down line analysis. Yeah. That's good. Why did Blackburn go near vertical canopy from a front on the rock? They seem to know a bit about aerodynamics, and that seems to go against everything aerodynamics suggests. Worse still, they go with it on the Skewer as well. That has a vertical canopy as well. So it's actually it is to do with the way they're designing the crash system. I did this when I just sort of did a 2 minutes on the Skewer. They design the canopy very specifically to resist impact and resist crashing, so to protect the pilots and the air group if the plane crashes in the ground. And that ends up producing a flat canopy for some reason because of the way they interface it with the engine mount block. In car. The turret fired of such a Blackburn rock seemed to bottom the partner. Really was someone thinking outside his own box. Seems to be dead end. The idea was they would actually fly up next to a bomber, turn the turret down, and hit again. Hit it with, you know, fire all the sort of machine guns into it. The Firebrand carried 4 20mm Hispano autocannon, 16 rockets, and either one 1,850-pound torpedo or 2 2,000-pound bombs. Yep. That thing's to be honest, that thing is a beast, the Firebrand. I think they would have probably gone with the Hercules, but they could have well gone with the Centaurus as well. Centaurus. Jeff Beeler, Winkle Brown on the Firebrand, shorter performance, sadly lacking manoeuvrability, especially in the rate of roll. A disaster as a deck landing aircraft. Yep. Andrew Scott, Skewer Centaurus, can't help thinking the propeller will be spinning the plane. Yeah, they did that okay. JP, did they ever consider redesigning the front of Skewer's cockpit for the rock? No, not really. It was Bolt and Paul building it. Pretty much Derp Squad. Fly next to the bombers, fire at them, and hope the bombers don't know to shoot back. Melanie 16040. How can my internet be so bad that it's not playing at 144 stream? I hate my husband. Oh well. Right. So. We're now into the joyous things that are the seaplanes. The RB1 Iris. And frankly, these are sort of something special. And this is something I feel very sad that Blackburn didn't get more support for, because they really do produce these glorious aircraft and they get virtually no attention at all. And they do really, really well. But, as you can see, their method of ensuring reliability wasn't to fit a Cub, it was to fit 3 Rolls-Royce Condor engines, giving it a total of 1,950 horsepower. And sorry, I am starting to talk myself hoarse today, so I have quickly grabbed some very special original. Right. Hello, Paul from Chicago. Right then. Did they ever consider redesigning the front end that? Oof. Danny Freeman, I'd like to see a swordfish with a right double wasp and all the extras. Yeesh. Alright, Andrew Cox. Read a Turret Fighter. German night fighters had the jazz music system, or the scrounge music system, which worked on a similar idea from below, and the P-61 was supposed to use the turret in the same way. Yep. Right then, let's see. Going on, the P-61 also had 4 forward-firing training cannon. The idea of trying to sit next to an enemy and having virtually no relative velocity is simply asking to be shot down. Steph Thompson. Centurious in the Rock would have put the Hellcat and Corsair to shame. It would have been... the Centaurus in the Rock would have been an interesting thing. In the Centaurus in the Skewer would have been cool. Rock had no forward-firing machine guns, though. So, yeah, it would have been interesting. How many iron brew bottles are there? It's almost enough, I think, to make my wall of brew. It is almost enough to make my wall of brew. Right. So the Iris is a pretty cool aircraft, and it's unfortunately only 4 of them are built. And they are lovely, but there are only 4 built. And the reason only 4 are built is because the Air Ministry really doesn't like Blackburn to an extent. They love the aircraft they produce for their long-range maritime patrol aircraft, but they are always trying to make sure there are other air groups and everything, and really, they have slots they put groups into. It's quite interesting. There are certain companies who always get contracts for certain things, and there are other companies, no matter how they do, they won't get contracts, or they'll get a contract for a small number because they're just a really good design, but they won't really get a lot of it. Because the idea is to spread out the knowledge and spread out the information, but also to spread out the construction. So they build 4 of these. What's interesting is what they're made out. The wings were of composite construction with wooden spars, whilst the lower centre plane utilised tubeless steel main spars. 2-step hull was of wooden construction, skinned with plywood. And they are, interesting. Ben Grogan, these aircraft have me asking a question in modern terms. Why have low-cost prop drones not had a huge resurgence in biplane or box wings? Is it just avoiding them for marketing or something bigger? Pretty much it's avoiding them for marketing. But looking at the speeds that most of these drones are going at, one does wonder why they aren't going... Although, as Derp Squad points out, there is always the fact that modern aerodynamics are efficient enough that you don't need it. But it would be a very cheap way of increasing their lift capability to make them able to carry more. Melanie 16040, that meant a composite, that meant a complete entirely different thing back then. Yep. Probably the last. Stafford Thompson. Was Brunel the first or the last of the issue, or the probably the first. Actually. Then there's this beautiful aircraft, the Sydney. Now, the Sydney is what they propose to try and replace the Iris, but it's a bit too modern in many respects for the people at the Air Ministry, sad enough. Although it's very, very good looking. And I have a very cool picture here. Which I am going to pull up. He says, when he can find it. Yeah, still working sound-wise. I keep worrying about that. Right then. This is the Sydney at full extension. Those wings are 100 feet in span. And think, if this had gone into full rate production, this could have been the British long-range reconnaissance aircraft in World War II. This would have been the British equivalent to the PBY and the Walrus. Well, to the PBY, probably, more than the Walrus. Andrew Cox, if you want endurance, single highest aspect ratioing is more efficient. Calvin Rosebud, read biplane drones. Yes, wing mechanization and composition lightweight materials outweigh the added drag of second spoke wings. Sydney range is only listed 750 miles. Yes, it's kind of interesting. They only produce one experimental aircraft, and she has what they call the civilian tank profile in her, because they're only using her for initial testing. They do some theoretical work, and they work out with regular tanks they can get up to at least 1,500 miles, and in overload capacity. And remember, overload is the big thing, because, and the Perth is a good example of overload. If you consider in overload, the capacity, the range of the Perth goes up by 600 miles. That's like 75, that's 2/3 added on. So if your initial range is 1,500 miles, and your overload you go up by 2/3, you're talking about 2,500 miles range. The Perth is their last great flying boats, and it's also gorgeous. Melanie said in 1640, before the extension, did wings fold? Not. They had plans to try for them to be able to fold as well, but because they thought about the idea of it possibly being able to use to be flown off ships, and a very heavy catapult aircraft being designed, but no one went there in the end. But that would have been quite scary. So, for starters, Blackburn is down to Robert Blackburn, 1885 to 1955, pioneer of Yorkshire aviator and specialist in the construction of aircraft for the fleet. He does a lot. He produces a lot of very cool things. And the thing is, in many ways, Blackburn technology is so critical because it can filter into so many other areas of design. So the fact is, there's the Blackburn tanks and fuel tank approach, which filters into the rest of British aircraft design. There's all sorts of innovations they make in terms of the structure, the cladding, everything. In that Blackburn are ones pushing forward the boundaries of design the whole time, and that sometimes means that the aircraft they actually produce in the end aren't that great, because they're right at the bleeding edge, and so they're not that practical. Yes, that is a float plane Blackburn Buccaneer. Or Blackburn. I mean, yeah. It is a float plane Blackburn. I thought you'd all enjoy that at the end. And this is the last treat from Blackburn, really. I thought I'd put one of the more forgotten aircraft, the B-20, and I just think it's cool. Nick Waters, oh my god, float plane buck, that's quite a slip. Yeah, I know, I do apologise. But let's be honest, the B-20 is quite cool. Yep. That's a design and a half. And actually, I was sitting there thinking, if I wanted to do low-cost tourism, if I wanted to do low environmental impact tourism these days, I'd be bringing this sort of thing back immediately. Because if I could design an aircraft like that, I could have a very big, very aerodynamic aircraft which could go around the world. But I could also have a system whereby it's basically its own pontoon for a small boat to come out to and pick up guests and luggage off. Blackburn, I think, did have a go at the jet fighter. What year is the B-20? It's about 1938, 39. It is extendable. Yep, there's a full plan of it next to it. So I'll do this part. And you can see the plan that it slots up into it and it comes down. And also, the really cool thing is the wings. The tips of the wings come down. So the wings sort of go up, and it flies, looks beautifully aerodynamic, and when it comes down, they become the floats. They're sort of the supporting floats. Right. Nick Waters, are aero gains worth the weight complexity of the B-20? Yes, they are, if that's what you're going with. And the thing is, the B-20 was reduced need because they were just building airfields everywhere they needed, so they didn't need the complexity. That's the thing. how building airfields everywhere, you don't need the complexity of the B-20. But if you don't want to build an airfield and you want to do sustainable ecotourism, then this sort of idea becomes very, very cool. No, those side floats don't retract into the engine gondolas. They go up and they become the wingtips. Carl Harmon, why did the UK government allow the BAE to control nearly all military contacts? Is this good, bad, or what do you think? Honestly, once you've created a huge monolithic company like British Aerospace to control your British industry, your British defence industry, you either order from it and support British industry, or you go anyone but BAE and you end up undermining yourself. So the thing is, it's good or bad. I would prefer a bit of competition, but I also think once you've created it, you've got to support it because it's your company. It's your creation. So, where else to find me? Twitter, Patreon, Global Maritime History, and we've got these things going out. On Thursday, there is King's College London's Lawton Seminar. On Wednesday, another 4 random books will come out. And I'm going to say last questions and thank you. I'm going to go in about 5 minutes. The reason I'm going to do that is because it is now 9:45. And this has been going on for... in total stream, I've probably going to have to do some editing on the stream at some point because of the snafu in the middle. But totally has been going on for... Let's see. I'd say nearly 3 hours, over 3.5 hours. So it's it's usually about the time I call it a bit of a day, and I've got to sort out the puppy before he goes to sleep. Can you take us to see the fluffy research assistant, please? No, I'm not allowed to take this camera out of this room because apparently my mum has put her curlers in for the evening, and therefore not happening, or I will, if she gets seen, I will be killed. This is the joy of being at home during COVID. Andrew Cox, a bit like a hydro ski concept like the Sea Dart 20 years later. Yep. Money to 60. Exactly the same as the PBY. King's Rook, thank you for the stream, Alex. Pleasure. Angus Arnold, good night, everyone. Night night. John Howard, Dirt Squad, likely. John Shea, from before you said the F-35 was good for Royal Navy but okay for Marine Corps. What would or could be improved alternatives to the F-35 like AV-8B says, but F-35 abilities type design? Oh, there's so much. But honestly, the F-35B is the option. Basically, I wasn't saying it was good for Navy and okay for Marine. What I meant by that is the Queen Elizabeth and the F-35B have been designed around each other as a class, whereas the LHDs for the US Marine Corps are designed for doing a lot more than just operating F-35Bs. So that's why they don't have a ski ramp. That's why they don't have certain other things. And yeah, basically, if it makes things a lot easier. Dan Ricano, thank you, Doctor. It's been fun. Blackburn, bless you. I'm worried about it. Juicy Susan, nuts. Missed this one. Best of you and a fluffy research assistant. Thank you, Juicy Susan. Ian Carr, for a long time, they're both Hawker Siddeley and BAC as UK main aircraft contractors. Yep. That's right. Thank you for an interesting show for the evening and for producing what I think was the first video on YouTube that has information on Blackburn. Blackburn. Potentially, yeah. Just picked up a fluffy research system of my own. Cool. Makes work much more fun. It will do. Sav Thompson, thank you very much for being here. Carl Hammond, thank you. And Nick Walters, thank you. Albert Sasky, thank you. Greg Sasky, thank you. Ian Carr, thank you. Juno191, thank you. Melanie16040, thank you for all the questions. Thank you for being here, Nick Walters. Angus Sonal, thank you. Daniel Freeman, as always, thank you. Kingsrook, thank you. Blackburn, thank you. Dirt Squad, thank you. Andrew Cox, thank you. Frederick Vega, thank you. Buckamere, thank you. Carl van Gasberg, thank you. Jeff Beeler, thank you. Ian Carr, I think I said thank you, but I'll say thank you again. Evan Hund, I think I forgot to say thank you earlier, but thank you. Paul from Chicago, thank you for being here. Thank you, everyone. Don G, thank you. And Dunrick Ironhammer, Ben Grogan, and Carl Gasberg, yes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Take care.